Los City Council meeting for Monday, May 6th. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Edgar?
Here.
Councilmember Gross?
Here.
Councilmember Murphy?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Graham Mejia?
Here.
Mayor Kusamoto?
Here. So our item up, the special orders of the day. We're going to be interviewing applicants for the Cable and Traffic Commission. And we'll do this as we've typically done. We'll have a set of questions to ask our candidates here. And I believe they're all here with the exception of Miss Gina Beery. So I think we'll have to take that into consideration. So is all the council members aware that we have a fifth applicant? Okay. So with that, first applicant up is Mr. Stephen Hammond. And Dean, would you mind starting us off with questions? Well, how about an opening statement from Mr. Hammond? Say something about yourself.
I'm a 15-year resident of Los Alamitos who has been showing his interest in this city for quite a long time, as many of you know, by attending functions and meetings and like that. I am particularly interested in the Cable Commission, and I hope to be able to demonstrate that during this interview process.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Dean, if you wouldn't mind starting off with question one.
Thanks for coming, Steve. What special traits, characteristics, or experience do you bring?
Well, since the last time I was interviewed for a post on the Cable Commission, I've been attending all of the Cable Commission meetings. Before that, I spent time learning technical skills in the classes that were available, and I applied those in station productions. I have a long time avocational involvement in media such as the theater and the radio.
Okay, how about the next question, Troy, if you would
Sure.
mind?
Mr. Hammond, why do you want to serve on the Cable Commission?
Well, I simply want to help the commission accomplish its role in providing public access to cable TV, whatever I can do.
Okay, Jerry.
Thanks for coming. What do you think is or are the most significant issues facing the Cable Commission?
Well, I would like to help develop confidence in the commission in providing doing its its advisory role,
Okay.
as demonstrated by the rejection of the council and the recommendations of the commission last time. That confidence doesn't seem to exist. There is a conflict which I think needs to be resolved between the sitting commission, which is the Cable Commission, and this technical committee, which is supposed to be advisory to the commission, and yet there have been indications that there has not been agreement between those two bodies. That is not something which I thought there was, but apparently there is a perception, and I want to do what I can to make whatever conflict like there is of that nature go away.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll go next. In your own words, what do you feel is the role of the Cable Commission in Los Alamitos?
Well, I want to see the Cable Commission do, I guess, what every commission is supposed to be able to do, and that is to provide intelligent advice to the City Council, which makes policy, and do our best to take that to to make the intelligent decisions and the data gathering which is necessary to enable you to decide what you want to do.
Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I'm given a question that basically everybody has answered the exact same way, including myself, since I started paying attention. So I'd like to ask a little different question. If you were the one vote, what would be your vision of where the Cable Commission would go?
Well, I guess I'm fortunate enough to my experience with cable TV in this city is that experience brackets a rather large period in which cable TV in this city has been really quite effective and quite stimulating for someone such as myself who wanted to volunteer. A lot of that has gone away, and I would like to restore it to its glory of even 5 years ago. So that's what I'd like to accomplish.
Okay, any other questions from and any last statements? Thank you very much for being here to address the council and answer these questions.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so next we'll have Miss Shelley Hasselbrink. And do you want to make any opening statements?
Sure. My husband and I have lived in Los Angeles for 20 years, raising our 2 boys. Involved in a number of community activities, and just want to get re-engaged with the city's and its functions.
Okay, Troy, would you mind starting us
Sure.
off with question one?
Hi, Shelley.
Hi.
What special traits, characteristics, or experience would you bring to the cable commission?
My experience starts, I was involved, I was employed at CBS Television for 12 years, a number of different post-college departments, including post-production, a little bit of production, some network sales and different things. That has been quite a while ago, but it's near and dear to my heart. As far as traits I have, I'm fairly organized to get things done. Rather than talking about things, I'd like to have action items and timelines and actually see something we can accomplish over a set amount of time.
Jerry, would you mind the next one?
This is a good one. Why do you want to serve on the Cable Commission?
Well, I was on the Cable Commission a few years ago when the city decided to move in a different direction, and in the process, my term had expired. So it wasn't anything that I wanted to leave. It was just moving different ways, and now that it's coming back, I want to get back involved with it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll do the next one. What do you think is or are the most significant issues facing the Cable Commission?
I think with the Cable Commission is just being more communicative with the community, both LaSalle, Rossmore, Seal Beach, and Cypress. Any place where we're broadcasting, where you can see your kids on TV or your friends. I think we can have a huge impact. We have a lot of things that go on in our communities, and I think just getting us out there. We're getting better on the programming and expanding the programming, and I think there's always room for improvement and growth on that. And I'd like to see the commission set a plan for that.
Great. Okay, thank you. Richard?
What is the role of the cable commission in your mind?
Not to be redundant, but basically it's to set the plan and get the people involved, both technically wise, city-wise, and people that are willing to contribute to the programming, and have a short-term plan and a long-term plan of where we want to be next month, next 6 months, next year, and next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Dean, would you mind getting the last one?
Tend to agree with Richard, but I'll also follow the script.
Yeah, rebel.
When considering,
The accountant goes rogue.
when considering the actions by the commission, how do you balance yourself, balance your interests with that of the community and organize business? Those are the terms of the neighbors.
I think as part of a commission or a committee or a city council, I think we need to take what's best for the greater good. Take into account obviously your own personal beliefs and feelings, but if it's affecting more than the greater good, I think that's what needs to be more important.
Can I ask you a follow-up?
I'm sure you can. Go ahead.
Having been, and I'm going to ask the other two, having been on the commission before, and I realize it's been some time back, what was your attendance like for commission?
My attendance, I had perfect attendance. The biggest issue I would probably say is in the, I think, 2 years that we had meetings, I think we had probably 3 meetings. So there just wasn't, we wanted to do a lot and there wasn't a fund to be able to do that.
Okay. Any other questions for Shelley?
No.
Would you like a chance to talk about your vision for the commission?
Sure, it's not super detailed, but I think, as with the cable commission, it is one of the few daily operational commissions. We have a daily responsibility. It's always on TV. I think we need to take advantage of the technology and social media and using Facebook and Twitter and all the different things along with the groups that we're televising to get LATV out into the community to know that we're on, and this is when this is on, and if the choir is on at 8 o'clock, let the choir boosters know so they can publicize to their group to make sure they watch, and if LaSalle baseball's on, use our groups that we're broadcasting to advertise and get more viewership.
Thank you. No other questions? No closing statement from you? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Okay, so with that, that's the cable. We'll go on next for Traffic Commission. Is it James?
Yes, Mr. Wilhelm.
Wilhelm? Mr. Wilhelm? Hi, would you like to make any opening statements?
No, I've been a 19-year resident of Los Angeles. Time has gone by amazingly fast. I've been a member of the Traffic Commission for 3 years, and that span of time I've become increasingly interested in the city and its future and the various problems it faces. And I'm hoping to stay with it for a little while longer.
Great. Okay, Jerry, would you mind starting us off? Question number 1?
Sure. Thank you for coming, Mr. Wilhelm. What special traits, characteristics, or experience do you bring to the Traffic Commission?
I have basically an engineering background, although for a number of years I was involved in various real estate related consulting activities and served as an investment analyst for a couple of major companies. And I think that kind of a background fosters good analytical skills, and I feel it helps me in addressing problem areas in any particular
Perfect.
regimes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
So I'll go next. Why do you want to serve on the Traffic Commission?
My initial interest, and it's an abiding interest, is having the opportunity to try to solve problems. It's kind of an engineering function. And but at the same time, as I said earlier, I'm more and more interested in the affairs of the city, particularly after commissions have allowed the commissions to become involved in the upgrading of the general plan, and now I'm interested in the plans and vision for the city, and have an opportunity to attempt to make some contributions to that. So
Right.
that's generally my sentiment.
Great, thank you.
What do you think are the most significant issues facing the Traffic Commission now?
Of specific challenges and problems. The most immediate is this truck depot proposition in Cyprus. But at the same time, I think that's an example of what I see as the basic traffic problem, and that being the ever-increasing flow of traffic, pass-through traffic, east to west. And this is an egregious example of things that can exacerbate those problems, but we'll probably see more of it in the future, particularly if this thing happens. So I'm hoping the council and their technical advisors in the environmental area can thwart the threat.
Amen.
Great, thank you. So Dean, if you get the fourth one, please.
In your own words, what do you feel the role of the Traffic Commission is for Los Angeles?
Well, as I think, as the stated purpose says, it's to hear suggestions and complaints that come from the public about conditions around the city, and also to initiate issues, things of problems that we perceive, and in turn make recommendations to the council, possible solutions.
Thank you. And Troy, if you would
Sure.
you mind last one?
How you doing, sir? When considering the actions by the Traffic Commission, how do you balance best the interests of the entire community against the likes or dislikes of yourself or your neighbors?
Well, I'm almost always convinced that my proposal or my suggestion is the best for everybody, myself included. So I don't think I would ever be conflicted in that sense. It hasn't happened in the past 3 years.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the council member? Are there last questions that weren't on here?
I'd ask the same question about
Okay.
attendance, since you're the current city member, how has your attendance been on?
I think I've been perfect. My boss is sitting here to my left.
I think so. Pretty sure.
I haven't, fortunately, I haven't avoided colds and flu and other things.
You're allowed to be sick.
So I'll have one. So when you mentioned about the problems facing the city, and you talked about the development over there in the 33-acre park, but you also mentioned about traffic flow. So in your kind of your analytical mindset, what would I say the one or two things that you think that might make a big difference in traffic flow?
Well,
Same
I'm
question.
sure limitations. You're looking at one of the east-west problems right now, and that's Farquhar. Maybe a judiciously located traffic signal or somewhere, or a combination of restriping and creating visual effects that will help to calm and reduce the flow of traffic in the hardest hit areas. Just a limit as to what can happen.
Mhm.
Hopefully, the potential for additional traffic is not that enormous. And particularly if some of these more problematic developments can be discouraged.
Mhm.
It should be interesting to see. It's one of the reasons I like to be around for a while and see how the city is able to deal with these things.
Thank you. So other questions? Any closing remarks then?
None. I thank you for the privilege of having served for the past 3 years and for considering my reapplication.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next candidate is Mr. Norm Ray. Oh, Norm, good evening.
Good evening.
You want to have any opening remarks?
No,
Okay, so how about I'll start into this one. So
I
what
think you
special?
guys pretty much know who I am, so.
I know who you are.
Yeah.
But I'll ask the question anyways. What special traits, characteristics, or experiences do you bring to the Traffic Commission?
Well, I've been told that I'm pretty close to 7 years on the Traffic Commission right now, and that brings a certain amount of institutional knowledge. I have some experience with stuff that's coming up now that came up years ago and was off the radar for a while and is coming back, and that's something I can put in. I'm an 11-year resident of Los Alamitos, and except for when I was in school, a lifelong resident of Orange County. I have kids in the schools here that walk to school, and I've got business experience driving. I look back in Shudder that I used to drive 35,000 miles a year plus for more than 20 years, and seen a lot. I've driven trucks commercially. I've driven my car. I've driven everywhere, and it seems like in foreign countries, and like I said, seen an awful lot, and then bringing all that experience with me.
Great, thank you. Richard?
Why do you want to serve again on the Traffic Commission?
I am not a small government guy. I'm a smaller government guy. And to be a smaller government guy, you have to be willing to volunteer. Mr. Gross over there is a fine example of volunteering. Volunteers how many hours a week? About 1,000 or something like that. if you gotta walk the walk, and if I want to complain about the size of government, I'm not talking about Los Alamitos, because we have a pretty small government here, but in general, if I want to complain about it, I've got to get out there and I've got to volunteer someplace. And this is a place that I've been given an opportunity to volunteer. I volunteer here and at the Boy Scouts. And so it's, you know, it's a place where I can walk the walk. It's, you know, a requirement to me that I do something. So here I am.
Great. Dean, number 3.
What do you think is the most significant, is or are the most significant issues facing the traffic commission?
I'm not going to say the trucking development, I'm going to say heavier or increasing heavy loads of traffic, and it isn't just from that development. That development may never happen. It looks like there's enough people in Cyprus that want to shoot it down, and there's certainly enough people in Los Alamitos that want to shoot it down, but there's going to be more traffic, and it's going to be coming from everywhere, and it's going to be coming from whatever does get built there, because I assure you that it's not going to stay a vacant lot. Something's going to happen there, and it isn't going to be strawberry fields. So it's watching all of this traffic growth, and one of the things that I've been noticing is that is the parking and traffic apartment row, carrier row, all of that, and a large part of it's coming from our own people, and it's because kids aren't leaving home. You have 25, 30-year-old kids that are still at home. That means that there's that many more cars at home and that many more people traveling to work. Even though the number of houses hasn't changed, the number of condominiums hasn't changed, there's still going to be more and more people there because the families are simply staying together, and for economic reasons, and so that's all creating a heavier traffic flow problem. And then there's the traffic jam at the high school. If I could do something significant about the traffic jam at the high school, something significant in a positive way, I would feel like I could walk. I've done something. That's a dream I have, is not solving the whole problem, but solving 20% of it. That would really make me feel well. That, and I'm wedded to the idea that we don't have to increase traffic flow everywhere. I would love to see the traffic slow down on Los Al Boulevard between Catella and Cerritos. I would love to see the development of a walkable downtown there. And know that doesn't make people in other cities happy, and I'm not really that concerned about the people in the other cities when it comes to that street. Catella, fine, it's a freeway, but that doesn't mean we have to destroy our town for everybody else. I would really like to see that happen.
Thank you.
Oh, I haven't missed any meetings.
Troy?
You know, in your own words, what do you feel the role of the Traffic Commission is in Los Al?
Exploring the minutia of traffic and parking and safety and learning all these little tiny things and talking about them and self-educating, and then presenting you with something thought out, well thought out. I don't think you guys need to know that there needs to be a sign next to a green curb, but we need to know that. That's minutia. That's something I've learned on the Traffic Commission. Green curb doesn't mean 15 minutes, it doesn't mean 2 hours. It means whatever the sign is that's next to it. And learning those kind of things and how they can affect traffic or parking is for us, and then presenting something to you guys. That's our job. Oh, and educating our neighbors. This truck thing, we can't do anything about it on the Traffic Commission, but as individuals, we can go out into our neighborhood and talk to people in our neighborhood, talk to people at business, and educate them. And we can pick up our information from the Traffic Commission meetings, but we don't pass any laws here. What we do is, in this case, is go out and talk to people. That's our job, and I trust that all the other commissioners are doing it. I'm doing it, telling people what's going on.
Great. Thank you. Jerry, what do you last one?
Thanks for coming, Norm. When considering actions by the Traffic Commission, how do you balance the best interests of the entire community against the likes, dislikes of yourself, your friends, or your neighbors?
I like what James said. I kind of feel like if I'm for it, then it's probably the best thing for the community, and I can come up against the majority, and Mayor Kuzumoto can probably remember this. I can be quite passionate about something I believe in, even though the majority will be against me, and that was a case where we were trying to decide who decides to get rid of a special parking area in the area by the Oak Middle School here. Who decides whether they can remove the locals only parking?
Right.
And I believed it should be all of the residents, and they believed it should be all of the property owners. And I did some serious table pounding about that one. But I still believe in it. It was a matter of individual rights, starting from the beginning of the country, that you're a resident, you're a citizen, and you have a voice. And it shouldn't be just those who own property.
Right.
Something over, I think believe it's over half of our people, maybe higher than that, rent in this community, and I believe that we should take that away from those people and say that it's only for landowners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you already got the question answered, Dean, about attendance? Okay. And are there any other questions? I think the one that I was going to ask, Norm, you already answered about the one thing that you'd work on. So, and I remember the discussion we had on the other one about
Yes.
I don't know. I thought it was enacting restricted parking versus deleting it. So
No,
was it
enacting
deleting?
is in the code. It was creating a code for getting rid of.
Right. Okay.
Restricted.
Oh, okay. That one. I remember
Yeah,
that.
I have
That
a
was.
question.
How to get
Oh,
rid
yeah.
of it when you don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, because I know you've been on there for a few years and you probably have some idea about this. You talked about supporting the downtown, the narrowing of La Salle Boulevard, and then also fixing the high school traffic. How would you do those things together? Because there's been, you've been on the commission, there's been a lot of concern about if you narrow that street, the traffic will get worse. Do you have an
I don't
idea
have
for
a
that?
plan yet.
Okay,
I
okay,
don't have a plan yet. I just keep absorbing,
right.
trying to see the bigger picture and trying to talk to as many people as I can.
Yeah.
I grew up in a newspaper family, and the newspapers, that's an antique institution.
Yeah.
I know, but you learn to say, what is the big picture? Because people will come to you with a story and they'll say, this happened, and they'll have some evidence, and they'll put it in front of you, and you'll get impassioned and you'll start pounding the table. But then you find out that there's more to the story, and perhaps what they told you is a third of it. Or 2/3 of it, but it's not the whole story, and there are things, and there's perfectly good reasons for that, and so I don't want to go off and say, it's entirely the high school's problem. I don't want to go off and say that we need to put more lanes here, or an overpass or something like that. It's going to take an awful lot of study. I think it's going to take some very simple solutions, because all really good solutions are simple ones, because complicated ones will foul up. But it's going to take a lot of thinking on all of our parts to come up with something, and we will find a variety. It won't be one thing.
Right.
It'll be 5 or 6 things that we do that work together, and if we don't do all of them together, then they won't work, but if we do all of them together, it'll work. I just don't like it. I just keep my eyes open.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. So any closing remarks, Norm?
I think I talked enough.
Thank you very much. Okay, so bringing it back to us, Council, what? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just wanted to thank all of you for coming. I actually find this the hardest part of the job.
Yeah.
Is telling qualified people, obviously we can't vote for all of you. And I've been on both sides. I was rejected once as the only applicant. I was actually accepted once. But thank you for coming and volunteering, and we really do appreciate what you do.
Anybody else? Troy?
Yeah, I'll telegraph my vote a bit on the traffic commission is that I follow every meeting that you guys have, and I read every meeting minute. I appreciate the comments that you both provide through the process. I also am very thankful for your work on the general plan update, and that is a joint traffic commission, and with all the other commissions, you guys have been very helpful in that process. like Richard said, I've had to go through a lot of making decisions, and people come up to me years later and say, "You didn't vote for me." And so it is tough because it's one of the toughest things. But I would just say thank you. Given the time to the city, I think you're right on. Is that it starts with volunteering. You want smaller government, you need to be a part of it. So thanks.
Dean?
I would echo the same thing. It is tough to try and make decisions based on who we think might be best on the commission, and it is personal. It's just more that I think the fact of the city than anything else. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for playing.
Jerry?
I'd like to add a little something that I may be telegraphing somewhat of my vote too. I think that it's wonderful that people come and serve on commissions. Most of you have already been on a commission. Mr. Hammond's tried several times, and we thank you for coming again. But I do think, just like with the city council, sometimes there's room for change. And so I'll take the chance to just say thank you all tonight, and I thank you for your service. Makes me
Okay,
sad.
so I'll just go ahead and close on I'll echo the same thing as the other council members here. And I have been on both sides. I was selected once and I was rejected once, and it
Me too.
wasn't a traumatic thing. I did approach this with the idea of serving, and then I have to say, I think I can say this for all of us, this job is still service on this end of it too. So, but thank you for your willingness to volunteer. Thank you for coming here and subjecting yourself to the questioning to put it all out there. And as the others said, we're going to do the best we can, and don't give up if you're not selected this time around, and we'll see where it goes. So with that, I'll bring it back to the council. What I would like to do on this one, how about let's just deal with it in two parts, and I want to deal with the traffic commission first. And what I would like to do is that we do have a third applicant that we didn't have a chance to see, and I'd like to just go ahead and suggest we table the decision on the traffic commissioner. I think that's we can do that for one more meeting. You're appointed. You can still continue to serve, unlike the planning commission, I think, where that actually sunsets when you finish your term there. So with that, I'd look for support from the council that we just try and give this have an opportunity to interview Ms. Beery on this one. So.
I would second that.
She's applied for both commissions.
Okay.
We
So-
should still interview her.
If you're going to hold off to interview her, I would say we take it.
Okay, I'm good with that too. Okay. So that will table both, and then so Wendy, we can schedule Ms. Beery as quickly as we can. Okay. So with that, so sorry to leave in suspense, but we'll go ahead and table it for now, and then we'll certainly let you know as we after we interview the fifth candidate. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I would like to maybe get support from the council for this staff. See what the process would be. We have, the majority of the commissions are 7 members. And look at the idea that maybe starting with the 2014 election, that we have each council member appoint 1 member to each commission, and that the council then jointly looks at the 2 additional, so that you have 1 that's appointed that would follow the term of the council member for the 4 years, and then the other 2 would be selected by the council at large. That way we can kind of avoid some of the political aspects that happen about, well, majority doesn't allow the minority or whatever to have representatives serve on the commissions if each one of us appointed one. I know they do that in Seal Beach. And it also makes each council member, I think, accountable and responsible if that person isn't either A, attending meetings, or is out of control, for lack of a better word. But I don't know the process, and I don't know how the rest of you feel about that. But I think with the election coming up in 2014, that would be the opportunity to maybe look at implementing it, not something we would do initially. But I'd like to find out how that might work and whether the council feels in favor of doing something like that.
I'll speak up. I like it the way it is. I think it gives us all a chance to have effect on all of the people that sit on these commissions. And I think appointing one person, and there's that given expectation that that person's going to do exactly what that council member wants them to do, and that's not necessarily what we want. We want these people to have, you know, bring their own ideas to the table. So that would be my opposition to it.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's a good idea. I mean, I'm glad you brought it.
Any thoughts? My first thought is just that the five of us voting, in theory, prevents a real radical from getting on. But an appointment, I mean, you could pick somebody who could get no other votes, and then they're still on. But, you know, it's a new idea, got to kick it around.
Troy, you want to weigh in on this one?
I mean, the only parallel I see is that last year or 2 years ago, Jerry had brought an item about potentially expanding the number of commissioners. And, you know, I mean, you know, I think that's something that we should think about. When I hear the stories about the quorum, I wasn't supportive of it, I'll be honest.
No, I know, that's
Yeah,
why I laughed.
so, yeah, but I wasn't supportive of it back in the day. But I do watch all the commissions, and you know, for lack of quorums, it's getting better because there's stuff going on now. But like the cable commission, there was areas of opportunity that we think if we would have had more to pick from, and maybe a middle ground would be able to have a discussion on the composite of our commissions, which may include an open item just so we can have a discussion. And then I would be supportive of that if we were able to do that.
Okay, so on the last, so Dean, this is the first I've heard of this idea. So you understand, your understanding Seal Beach does this?
Seal Beach is elected by districts,
Okay.
which makes it a little easier for them because they do appoint one person from their district to each of the commissions.
Okay.
But I think there's other cities that do that as well. And it would be interesting, not critical that we have to do this between now and July 1st or a time frame, but I mean, if there's an opportunity to find out from other cities what they do and how they do it, and the pros and cons.
So I'll have an open mind on it. I kind of side a little bit. I didn't think what Richard brought up about the potential of getting somebody who's really I'll say out there, a little bit different thinking, but that would be still one vote, right? I mean, that's
Right.
one part of it. But I'd like to turn to the city manager. So Greg, have you heard of this kind of setup where commissions, an elected would appoint a specific commissioner on a volunteer kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
In other cities?
Yes.
In your experience, how does that work out?
I'd have to say that when that has happened, there's been a shift to the way you have it for the majority eventually.
I would think that you discuss a little bit about it, having the report come back. I would think that if you made an appointment, it would still, your recommendation, and it would still take the council to approve it. So if you felt there was a reason to not push that person forward, that would give you the opportunity to do that. I do remember the first couple of years that I was on the council where we tried to, and I say we because we were kind of in the lower end of things at that particular time, tried to put people on commissions or give people an opportunity to change, and it was useless to even encourage somebody to apply in that particular process. So I just would like to, again, I don't have a hard feeling one way or the other. I just thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of bring it up and see. And it would be better to do it in election time so that, you know, I think at the last appointments we made, I believe city clerk mentioned about wanting to change terms of the commission members as well, where they all expired December 31st. And if we were to do something like that, it would make it timely because you've got new council coming in, or you've got new positions or re-elected positions coming in December of each year. So it would have an impact on some of those that we currently have, there's no question. But I'd like to discuss it a little bit further and just see the
Do
options.
you
is
have
all.
any thoughts to implementation since the terms kind of stagger? How would you?
You're elected for 4 years, so your
Yeah.
appointment would go for 4 years. And if that person moves out of the city, then you would appoint the replacement, subject to the concurrence of the council, much like in state government or federal government, if somebody is appointed, they still have to get concurrence of the entire body. So I would think if there's a potential question on an individual, ethics, whatever reasoning, it would still require the whole council to approve it. But I don't know how it goes in other cities.
Not all the terms end on in the 14. right?
No, there'll be 3 terms, but then the next go-round, the 2 terms, so by that point, we would rotate it, and then each person would be on for 4 years. I think, do we appoint for 3 years on commissions? They're 3-year terms? So it would be essentially extending 1 year additional on the appointments.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? So I would just, it's an interesting idea. Perhaps Greg can, provide us some other insight, but I'm not sure from a timeliness standpoint, I would think we'd want to get past June and then.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And we've got budget's a higher priority at this
And I
particular
would think the
point.
mechanics of actually getting there would be changing our, city code.
It may require that, yeah.
So that might be may not be timely enough to get it implemented by next year. So, not saying no, but just.
Well, we got a whole year. I mean, in theory, if we did it, it would be December of 2014 that we would be doing something.
Understand.
Okay.
A lot's going to happen the next year too.
Okay.
With that, any other questions, thoughts? Okay, so we're going to call recess and we'll reconvene at 6 o'clock. You can sign while we bring forward. Order, and the next item on the agenda is review of the proposed fiscal year 2013-14 operating budget. And let's see, have a staff report, please.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, as this is my 9th week in Los Alamitos, and this is Josh's 10th week, we've endeavored to listen to the City Council policies and priorities. At our weekly staff meetings, we've taken into consideration input from department heads and managers. We've also interacted with support staff in the community. Josh will illustrate the projects and programs arising from what we've heard at City Council meetings, staff meetings, and other meetings we've had with employees and the community. The department heads and staff have assisted immeasurably as we have cut approximately $300,000 from the proposed operating budget to date. I want to thank you, the City Council, for your support in establishing policies and the assistance of the department heads, management staff, and city employees. Lastly, I want to thank our new Finance Director, Josh Brooks, who's working very hard on this proposed operating budget, which reflects a small surplus of $9,915. We're also planning a short budget meeting, as is the custom, in the city of Los Alamitos prior to the next regularly scheduled City Council meeting of May 20th at 5 p.m. on the restricted funds. At this time, Josh will take the proposed City of Los Alamitos operating budget, take us through it for fiscal year 2013-2014. Josh.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight's presentation of the review of the proposed fiscal year 2013-14 operating budget. First, real quickly, I would like to go over the budget calendar. Tonight's meeting is going to focus primarily on the general fund. As Greg mentioned, in 2 weeks we were going to review the special funds and the capital projects funds. On June 3rd, we'll follow up on any items if needed. And then, if all goes well, June 17th, we'll have a public hearing and a budget adoption. With that, I'm going to jump into the introduction. As Greg mentioned, we have a surplus of $9,915 right now, and this was a collaborative effort by city staff to address as many needs as possible while still remaining fiscally responsible. And I too want to thank all the city staff, department heads, and city council for helping us through this process. I'm going to jump right into our budget highlights. So for our 13-14 budget, these are some of the top highlights that we've included in this proposal. We're adding funding for the maintenance of Coyote Creek Park, increasing funding for our garage fund to purchase police vehicles and needed public works equipment. There's funding available to replace our aging phone system. We're proposing a reorganization. There's an opportunity to reorganize our code enforcement function. This budget provides for funding to convert 2 part-time receptionist positions to 1 full-time receptionist / business license clerk. Oh, sorry, thank you. And also reclassify a senior finance assistant to an accountant. It provides a 2.5% COLA for our part-time employees. Their last increase was about 7 years ago. And then also, it provides funding to complete our general plan. And I'm going to get into these changes in more detail when we go through the department expenditure sheets. But first, I'd like to jump into our general fund revenue projections. What you see here is our 5-year trend. And we do have a decent increase from 12-13 to 13-14. And on the next slide, we can go through the changes and the variances here. So starting with the first line, we're seeing some strong collections in property taxes and a rebounding real estate market. And that's why we have this 4% growth on line 1 for property taxes. Some other highlights are UUT. We're actually having a decline of 3% there. A lot of that has to do with flat collections and also the recent change to our telephone UUT. License and permits, significant growth on that line item, 78,000. We're anticipating collection of permit fees for the hospital building and the parking structure that are going in. We're going to be receiving those next fiscal year. Fines and forfeitures really jumps out, 23%. That's primarily due to our red light cameras and the trend we're seeing now, and we expect to see that continue for at least a year. Two other items I wanted to highlight here is the charges for services. That's mainly our parks and rec fees. We're having field closures next year, and so we're going to see a slight reduction in our revenues in that line item. And then also revenue from other agencies. That represents the monies we'll be receiving from the city of Seal Beach and the school district to fund half of the SRO, the school resource officer. Bottom line, growth of 3.3%. But I do want to point out that this revenue here for the SRO and also the one-time revenues for the hospital, if we back out both those line items, we're really looking at a growth of about 1.9% year over year. Next slide I would like to show you is our pie chart showing how our general fund revenue, where it comes from. We have our big 3, property tax, sales and use tax, and utility use tax. All 3 of those total 67% of our revenue. I do want to point out that it's a sign of fiscal strength for the city of Los Alamitos to have a diverse revenue stream like this. A lot of cities may have a higher percentage in sales and use tax, which can be kind of volatile during downturns. So this is it's a good diverse revenue stream. So I'm going to move on now to expenditures. This is our 5-year trend of expenditures. You can see we're slightly down compared to 12-13, our 12-13 estimate to close. We'll get into more of the details on that. Most of that, a big part of that is the donation to the Oak Middle School for the gym renovation that was included in the estimate to close for 12-13. Here's a pie chart showing what our general fund expenditures go to. 48% is PD, 15% public works, 13% recreation. Those are our top 3. Those account for 76% of the city's general fund expenditures. And we're going to go through each one of the departments. It's administration. It's made up of the council, city manager, city attorney, finance, and our non-departmental, which represents items that are not associated with any one department. There are some increases. We'll get into those on the next slide. I do want to point out that the drop in non-departmental, that there is a line item for salary savings in there that's not yet identified. And what that was an analysis I did of comparing our adopted budgets to our actual expenditures for the last 3 years. We typically save about 4% of what we adopt to what we spend. That amount there, the 75,000, represents 1%. And so it's for savings that we know occur in an organization our size when employees retire or employees move on. And it's something we've seen for the last 3 years. So I wanted to share that with you. Some other things that are going on in administration we talked about earlier in the highlights, conversion of 2 part-time receptionist positions to 1 full-time receptionist/business license clerk. This is important. This is a business license generates over $500,000 a year for the city, and management and staff, we feel like it would behoove us to have an individual who could dedicate part of their full-time hours to the enforcement of the business license and the processing of that duty. The second item there is the senior finance assistant, reclassifying that to an accountant. That's in my department. I have an individual that's taken on a good number of duties that fall under the accountant classification. She's doing payroll, risk management. She's overseeing our business license function now, and she provides a lot of support for my budget development and also the year-end close on the accounting side, the CAFR. And she does our monthly journal entries and a lot of other administrative tasks that fall under an accountant classification. So moving on, go to police services. This is their 5-year trend. The number that's going to jump out, of course, is right here, the SRO under youth programs. And on the next slide, I'll discuss a little bit of the increase, the overall bottom line increase from 5.4 to 5.7.5. A lot of it's 200,000 of it's that school resource officer that was added to the budget. We're budgeting it for the full cost here, and then we get half the revenue back from the city of Seal Beach and the school district. And also, we've increased this budget increases our charge for the internal service fund. When the public works superintendent and myself sat down and we reviewed the policy that council recently adopted, and we went through all the vehicles and equipment, looked at their useful life, and we came up with a charge that could meet the needs of the city for this year and also meet the needs of the policy to make sure that we replace the vehicles we need to replace. Some of the vehicles have a longer life than the policy states because of their usage. It's not as high, so we don't need to replace those right away. But getting back to my original point is that since that charge has gone up, the police use a lot of vehicles, so they're going to get a bigger proportion of that charge. So those are the 2 key increases on their budget.
On the school resource officer, when is the payment coming back to us? And
It's-
in what fashion?
It's supposed to be next fiscal year, and
So they're gonna pay in arrears?
no, I think they were planning on paying up front. Yeah, I think in the summer.
When you said next fiscal year, you're talking the fiscal year upcoming.
Yeah, the upcoming fiscal year, yeah. This is a graphical representation of the last 5 years of the police service operating budget. The growth from 10-11 to 12-13 is primarily due to negotiated increases in the MOU. And then, of course, we're just talking about this jump. A big chunk of that is our SRO and the internal service fund charge increases. So move on to community development. Bottom line, community development's dropping almost a little over 50,000, and we'll get into those differences and changes on the next slide. This budget reflects a continuation of utilizing a part-time clerical assistant, and also an opportunity that we may have here due to a recent retirement to reorganize our code enforcement position to a part-time position. On the flip side, contract services had to be increased for those anticipated permit checks for the hospital and the parking structure. So those have been budgeted for here.
But those are a wash, correct?
We do make money on those, but I believe it's in the neighborhood of 30 to 40%, depending on the size of the
The
project.
majority of that is reimbursed, is what I meant.
Yes, yes. That's- yeah.
Well, I mean, I've got notes, so I'd rather wait to the end, but I just wanted to know.
This is another graphical representation of community development's 5-year trend. We'll go on to Public Works. Public Works, we definitely see some growth here, and I'll move on to the reasons why. We put in $35,000 increase for the maintenance of Coyote Creek Park. We're continuing with, on the savings side, we're continuing with a part-time 30-hour per week maintenance worker position. And again, like PD, Public Works uses a lot of vehicles, so they are receiving a higher percentage of that charge for the garage fund. And also, our city engineer, based on projections for the upcoming fiscal year, less of his time will be charged to the special funds. A lot more is going to have to be charged to general funds, so there's a significant increase there for the city engineer. Here's our graphical representation of the last 5 years. Again, the growth is the internal service fund, the city engineer, and the Coyote Creek maintenance. On to recreation and community services. This is where we recorded the $300,000 donation to Oak Middle School, $900,000 here. That's that jump. So that's most of that change there. Also, I'm going to move ahead one slide. So we know that's part of the change, and also the 2.5% COLA for part-time employees. Parks and Rec has a lot of employees, and so they're going to be absorbing most of that cost in this budget. That chart looks a little scary, so I made another one that looks like that with the 300,000 backed out. So we can see that the growth from 12-13 to 13-14 is about 2.2%. And again, mostly because of the COLA for part-timers. So this is our fund balance matrix. This is projecting what our fund balance will be at the end of this fiscal year, 6/30/2013. There's our mid-year number, $12,250 surplus. These are our different spendings from our different designations. The $300,000 is coming out of unassigned fund balance for the donation to Oak Middle School. And we end at 7.1 million, just over 7.1 million. And if we go to the next slide, we look at what this proposed budget would look like. There's our surplus, $9,915. Spending to complete the general plan will come out of that designation. And then right at this time, staff's recommending that we use $95,000 of unassigned fund balance to fund our half of the SOR for the next fiscal year. And then that would end our year 6/30/2014 at just over $6.9 million. Just want to keep council appraised of the future challenges that we have in front of us. 800 megahertz, our communication system for law enforcement. 2015, 16, that kicks in. That's going to cost anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000. So we're working on ways that we can finance that. Just recently, CalPERS announced rate stabilization, and those rates will start increasing anywhere from 3 to 4% a year for 10 years, starting in 15-16. We're going to have to figure out a way to fund our school resource officer in our budget. We have contract negotiations coming up with our POA in September and also CEA in April of 2014. Another fun task, Affordable Health Care Act compliance. Myself, my staff, we're working on understanding that law and how to best maneuver to limit or reduce any penalties we may have to pay to comply with that act. And then finally, there's a opportunity in our dispatch and records equipment where we may be able to replace that at a one-time cost and reap some long-term savings. So these are sort of our future challenges. And then one last slide. I'm going to go through sort of the highlights of this budget. We have funding for the Coyote Creek maintenance. We increased our funding for the garage fund. We have funding to replace our phone system. We have an opportunity for redevelopment or reorganization and community development. We have a funding to convert two part-time receptionists to one full-time, reclassify a senior finance assistant to an accountant, provide 2.5% COLA for part-timers, and it also funds the completion of our city's general plan. And with that, any questions you guys may have?
Anyone want to go first? Jerry, you want to? No, I've got it. Dean, you want to finish any of your questions you have?
I have a lot of questions, but it's more department by department. And I'm not quite sure, do you want me to go through each of these, or do we rotate around doing that? Because overall, it looks like there's increases in retirement costs. Is that because of the PERS change?
Not for the PERS change here, but PERS has been increasing for several years now. Part of the recession, they had to factor in increases year over year.
So is that factored in why we see retirement costs increased?
Yes, that's part of the expenditure projection.
And there's things that, for example, in the city manager, city clerk, page 18, we go from an estimated year end of 281,040, which is the same as the actual for 11/12, up to 392,506. That's over 100,000 increase just in salaries for city manager and city clerk. Is there a reason? Because we're bringing on this to me doesn't account for the benefits and a benefits package, but 100,000 increase in those two positions. Is there a reason that it's that high?
I think what we're budgeting for is a full year of the city manager at, I believe, top step. And then we're also going to have that business license / receptionist in that position there under city manager, city clerk. That's why you see the hourly rate drops from 37,000 down to 15.
How much did you say that saving is?
It wasn't savings. That was actually going to be a cost, and I believe it's in the neighborhood of $12,000 a year to fill that with a full-time position.
And the rationale for doing that, of going from 2 people to 1, is what?
Again, it's the business license function. It generates nearly $500,000 a year, and we feel like it's important to have a full-time person overseeing that, or using part of their full-time hours to oversee that function.
We were looking at the trends from a few years ago, and they didn't have any emphasis on that position. We saw a dip in revenues of, what, about $200,000?
Yeah.
So it was almost like cutting off one's nose just by one's face. It's a very important function, generating, it's like $500,000, $500,000, and to risk that for the 12,000, to take a chance of having a decrease of 200,000, it just seemed like a good investment to combine those two positions, and also the service to the community and image. But primarily, when we saw that dip from a few years ago, it was pretty scary to look at that.
The reason I'm asking the question is we're going from 2 half-time to 1 full-time. So we got increased benefits because full-time qualifies for different benefits than part-time. The business license aspect is currently handled out of your department with the accounting folks that you have.
Right.
You have the ability, when you got two people part-time covering it, that if somebody's off, vacation, whatever the case may be, you have somebody else able to cover in that particular process. We invested several years back, I think, $295,000 in accounting packages, upgraded the accounting system, and that was supposed to be implemented over a period of time, and my understanding is that's not been implemented totally. And we also talked at one stage about having business licenses renewals being online, where they could be processed online, so the cost factor actually would probably be less. I've had businesses that have complained to me over the years that they get a blank form that they have to fill out everything every year, rather than having a form or being directed to a website where it's all integrated in there, and then they just correct what's there. When I asked that question, they said, well, they want everybody to go through everything again just to reaffirm. And it doesn't seem to me, for some of our long-term businesses, to be that cost-effective when you've got to go through and fill out 2 full pages of everything again. You've got existing forms. So it would seem to me, if we automated what we're doing, to create one full-time position at a higher cost, with the idea that we're going to, increase revenue, I'm not sure that we're doing it. And I'm concerned from that standpoint that we're taking 2 people that are costing us less money that have a greater flexibility, because I know from time to time those 2 positions have floated to other areas within the city when there's been vacancy, when there's been a need. You can't do that when you got 1 full-time position. And I'm just concerned, are we thinking that process totally through? I understand your perception from the dip of a couple years ago, but we've got a accounting system. We're not using the web and the ability to renew this stuff online on a lot of the permits and licenses that we have, and yet we should be, even to the extent of paying the processing fees and everything else online, and making it easier for the businesses and easier for any permits that we're doing. They're doing it, I think, now in Parks and Recreation, where they can actually sign up and pay online. Question is, why aren't we doing it with everything else within the city?
Well, we could look at that. What we did look at was a trend, and the way it was explained to us is that they had a full-time person, and then they went to the part-timers, and something went badly awry because it had
We've
very
had,
extremely drastic dip.
We've had changes in management levels as well during that same period, which for a while the finance director was acting city manager, which has, a factor in the process. So I think when you look at the trends, you really need to look at the full history around that in terms of why some of this went. I just would hope we can look a little bit closer
We
at
could do
it,
that.
because it seems to me we have the ability to automate a lot more than what we've been doing.
If you have us let someone else ask questions, back to you, is that
Yep.
okay? So anybody,
Do we want to do this department by department, and that way we get through everything? In other words, we're dealing right now with city manager, city clerk, city council.
I'll just vary as, Josh, you okay with that? Or we'll just kind of deal section by section?
That's fine,
That
yeah.
way. So on the city clerk, city manager
City.
category, city manager, city clerk, any other questions about that from the council? Anybody else?
A question on form. On one of your first slides, Josh, you actually had percentages up there. But that was the last we saw, percentages. That one. Would it be possible to have percentages included? Personally, I'd rather have the percentage increase or decrease much more so than what actually happened in 2010.
Okay.
I don't know if you're subject to rules that say how much you have to present, or, I mean, I don't really see where you fit in percentages, so something would have to go.
We could find a way to,
But it would, the percentages would help me a lot more than what goes on, what went on 4 years ago. Just a question.
no, yeah, we can change that.
Okay, it's so much easier to analyze with that up there. And I'm just speaking, in the last year, between
Right.
last year and this year.
Right.
Not all the other years.
Okay, any other, so, it's sort of general one, so, next category would be?
Yeah, yeah, just a question, I guess, approach, we can go through department by department. I guess some of my questions are at a bigger or higher level, just directionally. I mean, if you go to the last chart and you say, hey, look, here's the summary of where we're heading. Just before we get lost down into the detail, future challenges, keep going though, because the summary, it kind of comes down to right there. Coyote Creek maintenance and funding. We have a park that's approved. They have an RFP going out, and it would be interesting to know what the construction timeline is, because if that's number one, driving a significant amount, how much specifically is that, and when does it cut in? Because the construction schedule doesn't show a park even in place until midway through the year, but it's number one on the list. So I was just curious, when do you show the maintenance kicking in, and how much?
Well, we're expecting maintenance to kick in January.
Okay, so 6 months of maintenance for $100,000.
It's 35,000 that we funded.
Okay, so 35,000 is one of the highlights on $11.7 million budget. 35,000 makes the highlights. Was just one of my questions. The increase in the garage fund. I think the garage fund question is really the most significant question that we're really dealing with, because we approved a policy last council meeting that we really didn't know what we approved, and I didn't vote for it because I didn't see what the amount was going to be once you were able to put that policy in place and calculate it. In total, what is the net increase for the increase in funding for the garage fund as compared to last year?
It's approximately 112,000.
Okay. So in the garage fund is broken up into two funds, or two components, the operations and maintenance and the replacement of vehicles. So is that amount of the 112,000, is that on the replacement of vehicles only?
Entirely.
So the operations and maintenance, did that grow at all?
No, I believe it stayed relatively flat. Double check.
The reason we put Coyote Creek, we just thought it was an exciting project, not so much, we weren't looking at it as a budgeting, we just think it's very exciting for the city. That's why we put it that way.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, bottom line, our estimate on page 75 of your booklet, it's not really 75, but
Sure.
sorry, it's kind of out of order there. But we actually, our proposed budget is just about 4,000 less than the last year estimate for just the salaries and the maintenance operations for the garage.
Okay, and so the 114,000, if you look at that historically, I think, how much did we have in the account from last year in total?
Are we talking about the fund balance?
The fund balance for the actual replacement?
I don't have that right off the top of my head, but
My recollection is that we probably had around $330,000.
you're right, and I believe we drew down that account in this fiscal year by about 221,000.
That's right.
That wasn't funded.
And so, again, and I won't get into the minutia. When we get into the details and we start, I'm going to focus, when we do get a chance, I'm going to focus on the revenue first, because that's the money that we'll get versus the money we spend. And I have challenges that I just want to be able to get some answers on the revenue. I think that personally, we're potentially about $300,000 over projected in revenue. So now we're spending up to the revenue line. when I see the internal garage fund driving $112,000 more than last year, I'm thinking, where do we cut if we are over projected? Not that everybody in the council is going to agree with me, but bigger picture, I just want, before I get in the details, I just see that a little bit of a level set at the macro level before we get in the detail. If you were to look up there and see all those different costs, I really struggled too with 2.5% COLA for part-timers, and we've been really struggling to give our full-time people COLAs. And I just want to make sure that we're not sending the wrong message that part-timers are more important than others. And we're also getting ready to go into labor negotiations fairly soon, where I'd hate to set precedent on one side for the city manager and some of the key jobs. We've been trying to take a more aggressive stance on things, and on the part-timers, we kind of show a different hand. The 2.5 for COLA, how many part-timers are we talking about?
I don't know the exact number of individuals, but do you want to know in dollar terms?
Well, part-timers to me is part of your Affordability Care Act issue, as those part-timers potentially could get a double hit, 2.5% on COLA, and if they work over 30 hours or 120 hours per month, potentially get health care. So I'm kind of wanting to make sure I understand the full impact of a part-timer before we start giving them benefits and an increase in pay. I just want to understand what the magnitude is of that demographic. And if we don't know now, that's okay, but that's
Right.
something I'm gonna. And then and just to be respectful to the mayor, because he wants to go all the way around. Just the last thing, this chart to me, if there's anything else up there, and not that it's an interesting thing like Coyote Creek, but the most substantive dollar issue that's driving our budget, what would you say that would be outside of the increase in the garage fund?
I think it might have to be our opportunity in community development for that reorganization. That's significant savings for this budget. I don't know if that's what you meant from the cost side or from the savings side. That's what I see
Well,
as
yeah,
dollar terms.
So what's the other side, besides the savings?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and like city manager's pointing out, the replacement of the phone system is nearly, what, 150,000 potentially?
Yeah. I was going to save that. I actually called in before the meeting, and I logged all my issues with the city manager to make sure that I wouldn't catch anybody by surprise. But when we get to telecommunications or the technology plan, I'd like to talk about that a little bit too. Thank you, Mayor.
So there was a question you were going to answer, Josh, the 2.5 total. What does it amount to just from total dollars?
I believe it's around $17,000 a year.
And the reason we did that is, again, we've been taking input from our weekly staff meetings, and we're hearing that part-timers in the police department, and as we hear, they haven't had that, and Parks and Recreation. And especially in Parks and Recreation, we're hearing it's a recruitment and retention problem, that the surrounding cities pay a lot more for part-timers, and that there's concern of part-timers leaving and replacing in that, and that they haven't had an increase since, 6-7 years ago. So
Okay.
we were looking between 2%, 3%, between 2.5%. It's not cast in concrete.
Sure.
So appreciate your input on this too.
Not a problem.
Understand that.
So thanks, Troy.
Yeah.
Gary, you had a question?
Let's park in area.
So we went through city manager, city clerk, so basically administration.
Okay.
The next one is police services.
City attorney.
Questions on police services? Go ahead.
This is a question. On the red flags, it appears that we're estimating an increase of $125,000 for this year. Are we proposing to raise the fee for the ticket, or are we just projecting that we're going to have that when we're running the line?
We don't propose the raising of fees. Those fees are set by the court, but we have seen a significant increase this year in both the number of violations and the fines we're receiving from the court.
Okay. And
I'd like to say something. One thing I've heard, Chief, correct me if I'm mistaken, is that some of it is an increase in volume coming from where the 405, with all that work, that people are coming
that makes sense.
this way.
The SRO for next year, I know that we are going into the shared costs with the school district and Seal Beach, who have been nice enough to kick in 25% each. The first year, it's more because we have to purchase the car and all of the extras, correct?
We actually projected those costs year by year. So we anticipate the 190 for this first year. That's the expenses for the cars and all that, that's averaged out throughout. So it'd be, right now, we anticipate 190 for the succeeding years also.
Really? Okay. And then the last, it's actually a recommendation. I've talked to some other council members and people in different cities. We have a code enforcement person who's no longer going to be here, if I understand correctly. And I was
Retired today. We got notice anyways, retirement today. just
great,
today.
great, and we wish her the best. So.
Yes.
What I would like to do is see if we couldn't look into having contract labor for that. I know that in some other cities they use the inspector to take care of that, and I think that would be a cost savings for us essentially because contract labor, we don't run the same risk as we do.
That's what we're doing now, aren't we? We're doing that right now,
Okay,
but we're
great.
just doing it on the interim, but we could certainly look at continuing it in light of what happened today, you know, with that,
Right.
retirement that we received.
Yeah, I just think it's an opportunity for cost savings for us and less risk and liability.
Well, that's a
for the
good
city.
point. I'm glad that you read my mind. I was thinking about that.
I was
so.
gonna call you and I ran out of
Okay.
time, I apologize. But those would be the questions that I have for the police department right now.
Anybody else? Richard? Yes, when the SRO came up, if I remember right, Troy, you asked the chief if they could absorb 50% of the increase, but it doesn't look like that's happened. Is that your recollection, and did it happen?
No, it did not.
Okay.
Please.
'Cause where it does say 90, and I thought it was gonna be 50, and we're gonna find it somewhere else. I realize that's magical words there, but, just wanna make sure, okay.
We can still explore it. I recall, I was here that night, not on an official capacity, and I do remember there was some discussion about looking, you know, try to look for it in the chief's budget. I know he had some apprehension. I did come the next day to the staff meeting, and there was discussion, I remember, that was brought up, and so it was investigated. We could continue to explore, but we haven't been able to find it, because like I say, we've had to cut about 300,000 just to get to this right now.
Yeah, I have some of the same concerns I think Troy does about, we're spending one-time money, and I'm afraid that's gonna get rolled into the budget as an ongoing thing. For like, the increased fees from the hospital are expected, I think use the word spending up, you know, I wanna make sure, like the red light, you know, the red light jumps $125,000. That's a pretty significant jump. It has been as high as 384 in other years, so, you know, as long as we're not like just like eliminating the yellow light or something like that, you know, it has to be fair, but,
No, we share your concerns.
Okay.
Josh and I have had numerous discussions on the very topic, and we've talked about, you know, everything that you're expressing here going forward, and to be very mindful of that.
okay, I don't want the assumptions to be too rosy, I guess.
No, and we'll have to develop strategies going forward to take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Just on the SRO, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so on the red light cameras, you know, what I would ask for consideration is, we have the revenue jumping up from last year at 240 to a projection of 260, going up to 385. And that level is, you know, starts to set the expenditure level. And so, you know, I would be comfortable if we brought our projections down. I mean, if there was one type of violation or one type of police stuff that we get a lot of negative press is depending on red flex cameras. And to think that we were going to get this much more I'd rather condition myself to kind of have a lower estimate that's maybe more realistic to the 4 years of data and use that as a baseline, because eventually when we rack and stack all of the assumptions in the revenue, like I said, of the 295 that I see, that's 100 of it that seems over projected. And even if not everybody is with me yet on that, I mean, when we get to all of those and we have to look for expenditures, we need to kind of have an idea. So if we're not going to lower it now, let's just keep that as a placeholder. So we've got 100,000 just in that one. I think you've heard that. Within the specific budget
You know,
area.
we will, I just want to mention, that's a good point. We will, because we're keeping a placeholder on some of our expenditures.
Okay.
So it's just fair to
Yeah.
do that.
So, because usually at the end, we would kind of have this tally sheet of things the council had issues with and areas of
Okay.
opportunity.
Well, we're doing that now, so.
And then on overtime, I looked the police through the different departments, so patrol. I noticed that the amount in there for overtime, a little bit lower this year. Chief goes up again for the proposed, fairly higher. Is that just, a lot of times, some of the people in our community, they see the involvement in SWAT and some of these non-city things, but we are contributors to the county. And, I just wonder, is any of our ancillary duties driving the overtime? Or is there things going on within the city specifically that?
Well, you notice the increase in overtime compared to this year. However, I just want to make sure we point out, we also have on-call pay and court pay, which are other types of overtime. And this year, they're all lumped into the same category. So you'll see the others are zeroed out, actually.
Okay. Okay. And then obviously in patrol, they got the Christmas Day of the internal garage fund, all of the expenditures. So there's a lot of police cars coming into the garage fund here. Again, to be constructive and supportive is, do we got, a lot of police cars that are sitting in the back that are just decommissioned and we need to replace 3 or 4 just this year? Or what is the, did the council before suppress so bad that now this is the year we're going to make it up and try to balance the number of police cars we need? Because, if we only have a certain amount that are out at any given time and we've got a rotation for, 12 cars in total, that's a third of our, fourth of our fleet that's going to get replaced. What is the root cause there? What's the issue? Is this pent-up demand?
Thank you. In the past few years, if you remember, we used to use the Ford Crown Victoria. During that time, we were on a 3-year rotation. A few years back, we switched to the Dodge Charger, and we were actually able to go to a 4 to 5 year rotation. Well, the past couple years, we've come to the end of that rotation. Therefore, we're now realizing that the optimal time is a 4-year rotation with those cars. Problem was, we purchased all those cars back-to-back fiscal years, 3 one year, 3 the next. Actually, June and August. So it's a timing issue that's kind of catching up with us now. What we're going to try to do is, in the flexibility of the replacement policy, is the flexibility to move it around a little bit. And the goal is to get to where we're purchasing 2 cars, then a year off. A little bit better budgeting in that aspect. But no, to answer the other part of your question, currently we have 7 black and white patrol units, 1 SUV that is ran 24/7. Then we have 3 and 3. Okay, on those 3 and 3 are during the day shift, 3 are during the night shift. You also have to rotate them for maintenance of the vehicles. So hopefully that answers both your questions.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, are we taping them together like we did the Crown Vics? Because those were tough times, and those cars looked old, and everybody in the community appreciated when they were replaced. It's just hard to, there's no smoothing. And like I said, I will be honest, I'm suspect of the policy change because I personally, and I didn't support it, and I still don't, because I still don't understand what the policy change was on the mechanics of how things get changed out, is we've got a significant fleet. Right now, we're talking about police, we'll talk about public works. Some of the council members through some of the meetings have said, hey, why don't we share scissor trucks with Cypress? And that might not be a good idea right now. But you know, I mean, there's a lot of different types of vehicles, and I just feel like right now I feel like we're slipping a little bit on this policy. We really don't understand the policy, and we've got a lot of vehicles. And even in what you just described, even if it was 1 or 2 cars this year, and we get in a smoothing policy of starting to replace them, I sure feel much better than the whole infusion. If the fleet's not getting held up by tape like back in the day when we started, I would say I'd be more supportive to see this thing be rolled out, even though the policy says you can do it now. Do we need to do it now? You know, is it absolute? And it's more of a discipline than it is anything else for me. So that's patrol. Within, there's one other one. And Cassie, so within the technology, communications technology, this sheet on page 55, is this, I thought I'd seen somewhere else in here, technology. This isn't the IT part, or is it?
No, this is for the police department's technology.
Okay.
It includes things like the cost of the maintenance for our 800 megahertz radio system. We pay, you know, a maintenance amount for the backbone of the system every year. It includes our CAD RMS software maintenance costs every year, which are pretty high. That's one of the areas we're hoping to save. It includes our Westcom contract, so it's technology, communications technology as well. So those are some pretty high but fixed costs, unfortunately.
Okay. So I guess just in summary, the capital or the the garage fund continues to be my biggest thing, and it's an area of opportunity. I think in total, police, what is, just for a placeholder to kind of pit up against the revenue projection of the $100,000 on the revenue side. On the expense side, what is the total amount for the police, just for the public's view, that we're talking about for the internal garage fund based on the new policy?
I'll have to get that number exactly to you. It's broken in by divisions, but I don't have the total right off the top of my head. Well, we could add it up if you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 numbers, so, you know, it looks like 10,000, which is nothing for admin. It looks like the big numbers in patrol, where it's about 50 or 60. So there's 60 or 70. And it's another 30 for investigations.
Are we talking about the garage internal service fund charge?
Yeah, I'm trying to get just a placeholder.
Okay, so for patrol, it's 133,364. Investigations, 46,677.
The traffic division is 6,668.
68.
So it looks like, what, about 180 grand in total, somewhere in there? Just.
You got admin for 26 also.
Oh, okay, so there's 200,000.
The SRO.
Okay. So just a placeholder to 210, and again, if we asked you, what do you absolutely need, not what our new great policy is pointing to, just as a placeholder, it'd be interesting to see what is actually mandatory, mechanically mandatory, and what is, we know what the policy says. It says 200 plus. So just as a placeholder. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Dean, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do, yes. I noticed the drop on the on-call work pay. You've explained that moving into the overtime. We're going up on contract services on page 49 from 3,200 to 73. What is that?
A significant portion of that is the phlebotomist that we use for blood draws. We actually have two different options when we make arrests involving DUIs or arrests for being under the influence of drugs when we need to collect blood as evidence. One option is we can take our arrestees to the hospital where they'll draw blood for $25. And another option is to call a contract phlebotomist, and that's $114. And due to some technical reasons that has to do with the collection of evidence, more often we are needing to use the phlebotomist, and the hospital is not an option for us. So we've increased that, but at the same time, we've decided that we will decrease our bookings that we do at Seal Beach. So if you add them together, we're trying to keep it about the same. We'll transport to county jail more often, recognizing that we're spending more on the phlebotomist.
Special assignment pay doubles in investigations, goes from 9,400 to...
That's based on some MOU adjustments that kicked in halfway through the current year.
MOU with who?
Police.
With the police.
With the police.
Yes.
Okay. Hourly increase with the records division, is that because of the COLA?
No, it's not. We reclassified one of our records people from a police aide to an intern about a year ago because we were short-staffed. And in that time period, it's not a great deal of time, but she's absorbed some additional duties. And by having her in that position, we're actually caught up for the first time in a very long time. So we're getting our DOJ reports in a timely manner, and decided we should maintain that level of service based on that.
The Westcom increase on the contract, about 8,000. You said that's mandated stuff. What is, we pay the attorney fees, I think, don't we, for Westcom?
Isn't it flat? We don't actually have a hard figure for the Westcom contract yet. I know they're currently in negotiations. And we were carrying over a flat-lined item, and I believe that we entered the agreed-to amount from last year's contract, and they reduced it after that time for this current fiscal year. And so it's a placeholder at this point, whether or not it'll be even with the 500,000 or whether or not it's going to bump up to that other amount. That was a placeholder based on last year's negotiation.
Because it was higher back in 10-11.
Yes, yes.
And I'm just wondering, we do provide the legal service, right, for Westcom?
We
So do those fees then put into your budget, or do they go into the city attorney's account?
I think they're in the city attorney's account.
Okay, because we're looking at, under the city attorney, I think we were looking at 500. $155,000, and I think that was based on the negotiated 40 hours a week, 40 hours a month. What was the? That's where the 155,000 came in. So, much like garage funds and other things where different departments are budgeting money, does that money then get transferred, or is it drawn as needed, or how does that work? Or are we doing the same thing with departments like we do with the garage fund? In other words, are departments responsible for their own legal expenses?
No, that's all covered by the city attorney budget.
Okay, so then why would Westcom's legal costs be under that? Or why would it not include just the basic Westcom agreement, and then the additional needed for that goes under the city attorney's budget?
What did you want, Dean?
Well,
23?
city attorney is back on page 23. The Westcom is on page 55.
Your question is why are two separate funds funding the Westcom? Is that the question?
No. Westcom, we provide, each of the cities provides a different function and service for Westcom. One of ours is to provide we pay a flat fee, but we also pay for the attorney fees or legal fees. So if that's the case, and it's part of his basic contract with us, we got funding in two spots here. And my question is, why? In other words, if Westcom, he's allocated for 40 hours
And this
with us,
amount is,
with the city. If Westcom takes another 6 hours, does that come out of our 40 hours? Or how does it add in? In other words, they're projecting some cost in the Westcom deal. I'm not sure that it's clean from that standpoint. But I'd like to know, we've been through this with the attorneys in the past, what we're paying for.
It's an allocation question, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can try to answer that question, but from the establishment of Westcom back in, 1997, the attorney fees have always been included with the city's attorney fees. Each of the cities has that in-kind service that they provide to the JPA. And I've never even seen a breakdown of what those costs are for Westcom. We certainly could look at doing that so that the council would know what that amount was. We could track it separately and we could include it over in that budget, but it has never been separated that way.
It doesn't seem like it's that much time.
It may not be, but now that we're on a flat fee basis with the attorney and then hourly thereafter, and the hourly thereafter is a significant jump from what he's built his base on. I just think it would be prudent for us to kind of keep track on where those costs are going or the time is going, so that if he goes over budget, which potentially is possible in any number of areas, we know where it is, that we can better look then at what he comes in with as far as his flat fee.
Josh and I were just talking about previous interim attorney. We haven't seen it segregated out, but we will.
I think that was.
We'll first thing tomorrow morning, we'll tell him from now on his bills to break that out. So then we'll have that as a ready reference.
On the communication side, are we the 2015 budget for the change of the radio frequency? We're not going to do anything until it actually comes up?
We actually haven't figured out how we're going to go about funding that, but Josh and I have been talking that's one of the goals for this year is actually in our IT strategic plan for this year to come up with a funding strategy, bring it to council. There isn't a funding mechanism there right now to do that, so we'll have to be creative, I guess.
Yeah, that's another unfunded mandate realistically that's being thrown down, but at the county level rather than the state level like we're used to, so.
On the bright side, since they gave us the first set of figures about a year ago, this year they reduced them about 100,000. So at least there's some good news there. And we're actually hoping that they're going to reduce them a little bit further based on the fact that they estimated high rather than low, which I guess is good at this point, but it made us all panic quite a bit.
The youth program. We've got salary, which I get. I'm a little not clear on holiday pay, special assignment pay, educational incentive. I understand that. Is those are those fees basically in thirds too? Is that part of that total package that we're doing? Where we're collecting, well, actually, it's not thirds, we're paying half and the other two are paying a quarter.
Well, I think I understand your question. That's for the SRO, and that's for 100% of the SRO, and we get the other 50 back as a revenue.
Okay,
Right.
all right.
The way it's set up in the budget, we thought it would be easier if we put the entire cost of the position in the budget, so you could see what it costs for that.
Actually costs.
So this is all of the benefits that go with that fully funded position, and then we'll get the revenue, as the chief mentioned.
I'm just, it's hard for me to understand because I don't totally get the 10-hour or the 12-hour shifts versus what this one's going to be, which is a little bit different. Plus, we're really only talking 10 months rather than 12 months that position is there, so they're funding the other 2 months even though school's not in session. But where we got $7,000 for overtime, holiday pay, things like that, I'm not sure how all of that fits into what we're doing with the position. And the $8,300 for the garage internal fee, is that one car that we're bringing on? We're actually adding another patrol vehicle then?
Yeah. Yes.
So how does that, maybe the garage fund can help me there, how does that vehicle fit into the matrix? Because we're driving 2 miles to the school and 2 miles back, as opposed to full patrolling of the city. Does that vehicle get rotated in? As I recall, the last time we had it, it was either marked on it as it was the SRO vehicle, or I don't know. I mean, it seems like that vehicle's not going to be in the replacement cycle every 4 years if it's only going to be used in that particular fashion.
I have a question with regards to that.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
just jump on? In some cities, they use that SRO to go on patrol, so they're a full-time police officer, they service the school, and then when they're not, they're in patrol. Are we not going to be doing that?
We are going to be doing that,
Okay.
yes. And to go back to your, comment about the car, while it won't be putting on the same mileage as a patrol vehicle, it's going to be much more than just a transportation to and from the school. It does figure it's going to patrol the school areas, and the high school and the other schools in the district as well, even though we anticipate it's going to spend most of its time at the high school.
As we get down to the replacement thing,
And-
those are some things that we'll do.
And I think we figured the replacement would be about every 5 years.
Emergency preparedness, well, actually, traffic. Is that, is 190, well, actually, the division is 472,000. Is that part of the COPS grant that we're reimbursed on that one? I was under the impression that was 100,000 that went toward the motor officer. Is this the motor officer position?
Yes.
And so the 100,000 that we get from COPS, which has been pretty much routine, that'll be reimbursed. That money then gets refunded in the process of reimbursed. So we're not looking at a total of 472. We're looking less than that, 100 grand less. That's correct?
Right. Right?
And then under the emergency preparedness thing, this is your CERT program. Do you know how many Los Alamitos citizens have actually graduated from the CERT program?
All total?
Mm-hmm.
Since its inception?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I really don't know.
I did.
I'll tell you how many are enrolled in this class.
Yeah.
How many is in this class?
7.
7?
How many
It's starting
classes?
to
Really
pick
good
up.
number for us.
Yeah, it's starting to pick up.
That's what I don't recall us having large numbers in the classes from that standpoint. And we don't know how many are still active from the original group.
I'm sure I can get that number, but I don't know myself right now.
Well, in all fairness, just as someone who used to be on that list, I never receive anything. So I think that that's something we could address also, is if people have fallen off the list. And I've actually responded to fire, and I've responded to something else, and it's been called a couple of times, and then it was canceled. But I no longer receive any of those emails, so it's interesting.
Now, that's it for police, thank you.
Okay, so, we want one more on, yes, or was the question?
And it, actually, Dean
Okay,
was my
okay.
central.
All right, so I just have one question on page 49, and I know that we kind of talked about this off and on, but on line, code 5121, the overtime for Wings, Wheels, Rotors. I would like to see us zero that out and expect the chamber to pick up their cost on that one like we would charge any other entity. So I know this was been put in place a couple years ago, but I know you would typically bring a report to the council and basically make a request, right, to incur the overtime expense at the city's cost. But I think at these times, there's another $5,000 that we can preserve. So with the council, I'd like to see us to zero that out. What the costs are, they still will be required. You'll still be needing to provide service, but I think it'll be something we'll look to the chamber to pick up their tab on that one. And I had a discussion with the chair of the chamber, kind of explaining my perspective. So.
Can I talk about that for a minute?
Sure.
Okay. I don't disagree with your comments. What I do believe, however, is that we don't have a clean policy on what we do when it relates to special events and what we provide. As an example, having chaired that event for 4 years, originally the city was going to charge us for the police, and the fee came in rather high. We switched the program, and it's still in place today, where we bring police vehicles, allow them onto the field at no cost to display command posts and SWAT vehicles and things like that, and it gives us a greater presence on the event itself of police. The base is patrolled by military police. They have those folks there. If something happens on the base right now that's of a criminal nature, the city responds in and handles the law enforcement aspect of it while the military police maintains the day-to-day stuff. My discussions with the PD is they feel they need to be there, even though we have adequate numbers of law enforcement officers on the field. So realistically, deploying officers onto the field really becomes a policy thing, much like the 4th of July, and we absorb those costs on the 4th of July, the same thing with race on the base. The question, to my mind, comes into the fact of additional traffic and what happens with the traffic on the streets, and this is reflected more in patrol, and that's part of where that $4,800 comes in, is, and there's some money, I think, in Public Works on that same line item, in terms of setting up signs of no parking and putting additional cones actually out on the public streets and so on. Those, to me, would be the hard costs that probably should be charged, but we've been back and forth through some of this stuff. I know St. Hedwig's reimburses the city for officers, but again, there's no real city policy that says they have to have armed, uniformed police officers there, as opposed to using private security or something else like that. So I think at some stage, council-wise, we need to talk policy relative to special events. We've got this thing coming up with, which we're not taking any action on, I don't think, from the standpoint of the city council, but we've got the Sugar Beet Festival thing coming up where they want to shut all the streets, close things down, and we've not even had any proposal yet in terms of what those costs are. So that's in this budget the same way, and I don't know whether it's being included in PD in that respect either, but I think there are some jurisdictions that have a special event, Anaheim probably being one of them, that they have an allocation of how much that's going to be, and then everybody pays the fair share. It's not a situation of, well, this guy pays more, that guy pays more, and so on. I just think we need to identify so that we're fair to everybody across the board.
I can't disagree with that. So I think the difference between the two other events you named, the Race on the Base and the 4th of July, those are city-run events, right? Which is like St. Hedwig's and the Sugar Beet Festival and Wings, Wheels, and Roads. Those are other entities. They're not city, right? So I think that's a big difference in my mind. So I think that the policy is in order if we don't have one, but I don't know what would compel us to expect payment from St. Hedwig if we did have a policy. They just would open up their checkbook and write a check. I don't, I don't know how that works, so.
I don't know.
Yeah.
In other words, I don't know whether the city has told St. Hedwig's, you have to have 2 uniformed officers, maybe because I don't know if they serve alcohol or not. And it's something that we've, policy-wise, has put forward. With respect to the Wings, Wheels, and Rotors, I don't think that officers are needed out during the event itself. I have a difference of opinion with the chief on that.
But I think in terms of the controlling traffic on the street, they are needed there.
Yes.
I think that draws such a large crowd that we do need that. And
Absolutely.
I believe that would be something, in my mind, policy-wise, that the entity hosting the event that is putting the impact on the community that will necessitate us to go and incur extra expense on the city, then they ought to cover it. I think, just very simply put. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. We've also got the situation coming up in August with the Pony League World Series thing that's going to have an impact down there. And I think it's important that we have some type of program in place so that those types of things, we're not fishing around trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Okay. Jerry, have something else?
Yeah, just with regards to that, I agree with the mayor that if it's an outside entity, and as he said, we both have met with Janita Strohmeyer, and she agrees that now that the Wings, Wheels, and Rotors is making a profit, while not a huge amount, that they're comfortable with potentially addressing at least paying half and then moving forward at some point, absorbing the full cost. So I don't think that the chamber is opposed to it. I think that's a great thing. But with regards to the pony, I mean, I don't think that we should be looking to charge them because it's a one-time event. We've, for Wings, Wheels, and Rotors, not charged them for how many years, Dean, has this, is it the 6th year?
This will be the 12th year.
Oh, gosh, 12th year. So, I mean, I think that that's why, as you said, there has to be a policy, but at the same time, I don't think that we want to discourage groups from starting these programs. And if in the beginning we need to help them with their seed money, in essence, by, providing police services, but at some point, if they're making money, they need to be able to carry their own weight.
What's the pleasure of the council on this one? What is the direction that you would like us to proceed on this?
Well, I would just, I don't know, Rich, if you have an opinion. I would like to have a discussion of policy. I think I'm very respectful to everybody's view here. I definitely have a view. I just think we need a holistic way of looking at it. Any of us that have actually had to get an event up and off the ground, it's painful. And, the Pony League, we just make an exception for, I just think we should, incent groups that want to make our community better. And, these type of events draw point of sale revenue and people spending money in our cities. But that's just my opinion. And I would just like to have a policy discussion. I think that having it in the budget is something, maybe this is one of the last of the 5 items that gets left and we have a policy discussion on what, then we just let the vote carry it either way. Because I feel strongly probably the other side of this is I like to see events where, we have, it's sort of like a rationalization we did for the SRO, right? We want to provide safety where the people are. The people are at these events. We have a vested interest to provide a safe environment. I don't know if we should fund it all the time. I'm with Warren on that, but we should be uniform. We should look at other cities and see what they do. To Seal Beach, when they do the 4th of July or any of these events, are they charging folks? I don't know. I think that we should just be uniform in the way that we do it.
They just had their car show like 2 weeks ago over there.
Yeah, and so
it's on their main street.
And look, I'm the biggest. I'm the person that wants to chop stuff more than anybody, right? I'm feeling we're already overspending, so I would be supportive of where Warren's at right now. But I think it would be good to just have a policy discussion and to do it one time.
Okay, we
get all the stakeholders here.
Do some research on that too.
Yeah.
So I hear kind of a combination of things.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so is that it for police?
I have one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Just under community outreach, we have a total amount of $590. That makes me very sad. I think that we have a really unique community. I don't believe that we have a high level of crime. I don't think we have rampant gangs. I think that the people of this community have expressed in the past that they would like to have a more personal relationship with the officers so that they're working as a team together. And so I know that other cities do things like barbecues where the police officers come out to a park, they barbecue the food, the residents come out, they get to know them on a personal level, and there's just a different connection there. And I think that you would see benefit from that because they are more likely to call an officer that they know as opposed to just calling the police station cold and not really knowing anyone. And there's been people from the time I ran the first time to the second time and ongoing, just saying they'd like to know the police officers more. So I would like to see, and I don't know what a barbecue or if the council, even wishes to increase this number, but something that we could do that would be a fun outreach between the police department and the residents, because I think that's a pretty sad statement. $590 is our total outreach, and that's not a criticism. It's just an item that I would like to see increased.
We've cut our budget in that area over the years
Right.
with the direction to find savings.
Yeah.
And when we prioritize things, unfortunately, that's one of the places where
Sure.
we've found savings that wasn't an absolute necessity.
Right. Well, if we could just maybe look at that. I know we're not making all the decisions here tonight, but if there's something that maybe we could look into. I think a barbecue is pretty simple. You might even be able to get some donations from some of the businesses in the area. I know they're very giving that way, and the events that I've had to get in-kind donations for it, they've been really good that way. And I just think it's good PR for the police department, and I just think it's good for the community to have a personal relationship. They love you, they know you, but they may not know anybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last comment.
Sure.
Josh, can you put up the police slide? Do you have the slide that just shows the revenue or the expenditure line? Yeah. Something we ought to just take a pause and just reflect on is in the last 2 years, police has increased by $800,000, $400,000 a year on average for great reasons. But if we really need to keep an eye on this. This is the fastest growing portion of our budget. We don't want to start going down paths where you see a lot of cities reevaluating their perspective on police, whether they look at cheaper alternatives, sheriff, et cetera. We love our police. They do a great job, but we also, we've got a big union, POA negotiation coming up. We've got a lot of things happening in the next 6 months that we really need to think about, and this is where it happens. This has the highest amount of the retirement funds. It has the highest level of the unfunded medical. I mean, this is where it's at, and it's exponential. So I don't know. That was just my last observation. I think everything has been justified, Chief. I think everything that we went through, but it's just that's the reality.
May I ask a question? Have we gotten new officers in that time frame, and is that part of the increase there?
A good portion of the increase that you see this year is a result of the new officer that we're going to be bringing in, the
Right.
SRO cost of almost $200,000.
Right. Is that what an average police officer runs us, is $200,000 a year?
Well, when we're talking about the SRO, we're not just talking about the officer. We're talking about the equipment,
Right.
the vehicle, all the safety equipment that goes with the officer and the vehicle, all of that stuff together. It's not just the person.
So at what point do we pay for that extra equipment and then we're just paying for the officer? Because once you purchase the car, it's purchased in a year, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so that amount
But we're spreading the cost of that out throughout. So,
for the 3 years,
right, for
Okay.
the car for 5 years, actually.
5 years, okay. What do we do if we can't fund the SRO after the first 3 years, or even after the first year? I mean, is that a car that we need within the police department? I don't know.
Well, the agreement that we're still working with the MOUs with the district
Right.
and the city of Seal Beach. But the idea is we're going to get a commitment from them for at least a few years.
3 years, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I'm just asking questions.
All right, thank you. So let's move on to Public Works. I think that's the next item up. So open up for questions, Public Works, on your notes. Who has any? Richard, you want to start? Do you have any that you recall? Okay. I don't have any for Public Works. Troy?
Yeah, can we just, so we're bookkeeping the garage fund. So we've identified, go back to the police, 200, let's just say 200,000 to keep it easy. Let's just say the SRO amount of, $25,000 to $30,000 for a car is one area of opportunity. If we look at Public Works, that's the next area where we actually have a vehicle cost. What's the total amount of Public Works garage fund?
Yeah, but it's only up 12, though. It's not a total of 40 increase, it's just 12. March,
40,010.
And I know, Josh, I asked the question before, but the money we have in the bank today, before we started this super fund, for, what was the amount? And I don't think you have it, but I think we rationalized it. It started at 330, we spent a big amount. So all we're really talking about, this is new incremental money, so the 121, right?
Yeah, 121.
Yeah, the new expenses. Okay. So if you were to profile the 121,000, what is our new vehicles we're getting in that by?
Well, the 121 is maintenance.
In operation.
Operations and vehicles.
Okay, so of that, how much is the replacement amount?
Replacement, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. I'm guessing percentage-wise, it's probably, I don't want to guess. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's about 70, but if, that, I just want to keep the placeholders, so it looks like it's about 70 of the 120. And if we end up kind of looking at areas of opportunity, let's just keep that out as an area. That's all I have.
Mayor?
Yes, Jerry.
I have a question, and maybe you can clarify for me. I'm sure you did it in the slides, but on page 65, line item under department summary by expense type, maintenance and operations, it looks like it's up 115,000. Will you break that down for me again? Down at the bottom under maintenance and operation,
Sure.
it looks like it's up 115,000
Page?
on page 65. Did I add that wrong?
65.
Page 65 in your book.
So maintenance and operations is going to include the Coyote Creek Park funding
Park,
and
okay.
also the internal service fund charge.
What,
Which
what's the, what do you break this down? Park is how much? I'm sorry.
park is approximately 35,000.
35,000.
And then on the math we just did, it was about 121,000 for the garage fund.
Oh, this is the garage fund, okay.
Yeah.
The park's only half a year, correct?
Yes.
Right. So full year would be about 70.
Yes.
Okay. And then I will, I'll bring forward an idea just for the council's consideration. We're going through a potential fee increase for the fields for our user groups, and a lot of things are being looked at right now. And I've talked to a couple of stakeholders in those groups, and one of the things that they're concerned about is, there's a significant increase that's being discussed, and their concern is that, and this is not anything towards Public Works, but that they would like to have a guarantee that the fields are going to be maintained at the level that their contribution would demand. And I think McCullough is beautiful, but there are some issues over there, Tony, and I know that you know them from over the years. And what they're asking is, and this was my idea, so you can kick me later. If we're gonna be asking these people to pay that much more for the fields, and we need to keep them maintained at a quality that they feel justifies their input, could we have someone in Public Works be trained above and beyond what they are now? Or could we get some contract labor to come in and help us with that, so that we can get a program set up for the maintenance of those fields? If it's not something we feel we can do on our own, either pick out someone in Public Works and have extra training for them, or have a contract laborer come in, educate you to the level that you feel you need, and then we can get rid of that contract labor once staff's been brought up to speed.
Currently, we do have the talent in the department.
Okay.
Our landscaping foreman, Gary Saldivar, is fully trained from a qualif. It's been a funding for supplies issue for the most part for the last few years. We've started cutting that down, Stephen, I believe from 2 years ago it was at 40,000. We're at 10,000 a year now.
Yeah.
When we cut that much, that's fertilizer, that's grass seed, that's fertilizing every month. Now we're down to hopefully fertilizing every 6 months.
Right.
It takes Mother Nature a few years, and then Mother Nature catches up with us, and that's where we're at right now.
Right.
So with these added fees, obviously, if there's money for supplies, we can do the jobs that we're trained to do.
Okay. Well, one of the things that's been brought up by the user groups, and I sat in on a couple of the sports board meetings some time ago, was that there's always some puddling problems, and that there are big muddy spots, and then the ground gets torn up in those areas really bad. The kids can't play in them. So I guess what I'm saying is they're feeling that there needs to be a higher level of training for staff, or I understand initially, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't that park not graded correctly?
Correct.
Okay, so those are the kinds of things, you know, we're going to be potentially asking them for a sum of money. I don't know what that is now, but they want to make sure that their investment is protected. And so I just would like for us to consider that we do something to make sure that we don't have the problems with the puddling and the muddy spots and the brown spots. And I understand what you're saying about the seating, but there are other issues that are, you know, you and I have been talking about for a while that have not been addressed, and they go to the quality of the fields. So I would just like for us to entertain that as a council, because I think that would put their minds at rest, and then the increase in fees, whatever that tends to be, whatever we decide on with the school district, I think it would be better received, and it would make our job a little bit easier, because really what we want are these beautiful fields for our community, for the adults and the kids, and it's a hard road getting there right now. So anything that we could do to put their mind at rest, I think is a benefit to us.
Sherry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do we get the money if they vote for a fee increase, but we want to increase our level of supplies? Do we, and so we're looking at next year's budget, which the fees would impact. We're looking at what we can afford today. Would there be an estimate of what we would get in? Because it would come into the general fund. I mean, what is the mechanism? I know you're on that ad hoc committee.
Well, we haven't come up with a total amount. There seems to be a great deal of concern about the projected amount that we're saying that we're going to do. But what we had is, when I started years ago, I went into a user group meeting and they said, we want better fields, we deserve better fields. So for the last 6 years, we have been using our time trying to come up with a mechanism to provide them with what they want. Well, through Measure K, we were able to have the schools receive the money, and we fought for that. We fought for money to be set aside for the fields to be increased, because the school district will tell you their first charter is to provide academics for the kids, and the other stuff is kind of by the side. So we worked really closely with them to see if they would increase the amount so that we could have these things done. Now what we're saying is, a maintenance moving forward, we have to provide the money in order to do that. There was a sinking fund that was discussed, and I don't want to go into it too much because this isn't the appropriate area, but there have been concerns that have been expressed in the past. And from my understanding, the fees that we take in, part go to the school, part go to us for us to maintain those fields. So I'm just saying, let's use our money wisely, so that way we can justify to these people we're doing everything we possibly can to earn your trust with regards to the increase.
So my question is, the revenue portion of fees, period,
Mm-hmm.
do they come into the Parks and Rec side and then go to
Yes.
Public Works? And so, but we, in our budget, even though we know fees are on the table and they're pretty significantly changed, we don't have a budget adjustment or proposal in the revenue, or we don't even have a projection of what the potential fees, because there is an extensive fee study.
Mhm.
But what would that mean in, $10,000 as compared to what that potentially comes from this rate thing? Does anybody know?
We don't have, as part of this, that we haven't, the working group nor the school district or the council have decided on what those fees are going to be. We've at the joint meeting, we suggested 2 different levels of fee increases, and we don't know which level we're going to yet, so it's difficult to project what the additional revenues and what the additional expenses are going to be until that decision is made. We know that tomorrow night the school district is having another workshop on these fees and they're making a decision 2 weeks after that on the 21st. So we should know more, at least what the school district is recommending, at which time we'll bring that forward to the council to ultimately make a decision on agreeing with the school board. So at that time, we can go back and include that both on the expenditure and revenue side based on their recommendations.
Councilmember Mejia brings up a great point. Is one side she comes in and says there's a stakeholder group that's concerned about our expertise. Then there's another side that says, I'm concerned about the supplies. 2 different areas in our budget. But the money comes into Parks and Rec. Does our policies mandate which direction that money goes? Do we have to provide further guidance? If Jerry really wants experts and we can't afford them, or one of us wants more supplies, how does the money get divvied up once the fees are approved? And if we don't know the answer to that, because I know when we get to Parks and Rec, please show me where the revenue side comes in. But it's, do we need to also fix our policy on how we allocate funds, or, would Tony still be sitting here next year saying, God, we got a lot of money in, but it wasn't used in supplies?
The revenue, the way the budget is structured is the revenue would come into the Parks and Recreation, the Recreation Community Services Department. On the revenue side, we don't have any, if we have any expenditures, they're very, very minute. So I would go back and tell Tony, hey, look, based on this new fee structure, there's a higher level of field maintenance to the tune of, hypothetically $15,000 a year that will be coming in. He would increase his budget on the maintenance side that level to make sure that the fields are maintained at that level. We would not, on the Recreation and Community Services side, see an increase in the expenditures on our end. That would be through Public Works.
Okay, thank you.
And if you could, they've talked about a sinking fund too moving forward. That's the majority, I'm sure you know, I'm sure you've heard. And some of that money would also, as Corey and I were talking earlier, would go towards the maintenance. Is that not correct?
No, the capital improvement fund would be set aside. That would be for capital projects at the field. So, want to say you want to totally rehab McAuliffe,
Right.
Regrade, put in proper drainage, whatever the case may be, $1 million or $2 million project. That's where that capital improvement fund would come out of, and whether that goes toward Public Works or that would be a CIP.
Right.
Account that wouldn't, as far as I know, the money wouldn't go into their department. It would be part of the capital improvement.
But it's used for the maintenance or the improvements of the fields, correct? Sinking
Not the
fund.
ongoing maintenance.
No, but the improvement.
But the capital
Right.
maintenance.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks, Corey.
Any other questions? Public Works? Okay, next item is,
I do have a couple of them.
okay,
Just to be consistent on page 71, you've got placeholder in there of 400 for wheels and motors. And I think your part of that has really been more setting up the barricades and the homes and things like that.
It has increased over the past few years. It's about a 12-hour day for our guys currently right now. And it's setting that up. It's traffic control outside, traffic control inside. It's trash detail throughout the entire day and cleanup at the end.
But are you going to follow the same policy to say that's
zeroed out and then build back based on what they need, or are you gonna allow them to?
I think,
leave that amount in there?
let's just leave it there. We're gonna have a policy discussion on it. I think that's really where we're going with this, so. Same, arguments.
And I have one other question on 71. We've not had this allocation previously, but there's contractual services for 35,000. What are you anticipating there?
That's the funding, placeholder for the Pad Creek.
Okay, that's Coyote Creek maintenance. What does it typically cost us to maintain a park? Not Laurel necessarily, because there's a big significant difference.
I don't have that information currently, but I can provide a cost per acre for you.
But understanding that this park comes with its own standards of maintenance manual developed by the architect for us to follow.
Yes.
Because while these seedlings are in their youth, it's gonna take a little more extra time the first couple of years to get it going. So this won't be a turf park, this won't be a mowed park. This will be a little special. We're taking a risk here at 35. I think we're safe. But the following full year, we will know. By the time we're at this exact spot next year, we will know whether that was a good number or not.
None of that amount is part of the 1.4 million of the grant?
Correct. Once they turn it over to us, that grant is done with. And once they turn it over, the contractor lets go or releases the project, it becomes Tony's staff's maintenance obligation through contract.
My understanding was that this was to be low maintenance from the standpoint of watering trees and things of that nature would be basically out of themselves.
It will be in year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It will be something that seeds itself and reseeds itself seasonal because of the California native aspect of it. But in its early years, we have to keep the weeds out and keep everything maintained properly to get it to that point.
Right. We have to manually reseed the park for the first 3 years. After the plants become developed, they will automatically reseed themselves as Mother Nature allows.
Okay, so moving on to recreation and community services. Questions on those?
I'd just like to make a statement. I think you're a page and a half of accomplishments. It's pretty significant, particularly since a lot of it is self-funding, for lack of a better word, reimbursed in the process. I think you've done a lot from the standpoint of the department in terms of offerings to the public and the outreach and community, the collaboration with neighboring partners. Plus, it looks like your expenditures are slated to go down about 300,000. I don't have many questions.
Anybody else? Question for Jerry?
I'm getting up on my soapbox. If you look on page 88, one of the things that we did for the potential community give back was we set aside some money for 3 years for improving the camps at the parks that are free for the kids. And we set aside, Corey, do you remember the amount for 3 years? It wasn't significant.
45, 49?
Okay.
Between 45 and 50.
Okay. If you look at day camps, which is the last thing before the totals on page 88, it's been cut to the point where now it was in 2009-10 almost $17,000, and now it's going down another 100 in 2013-14 to 12,300. I just think that this is something that is a great use of the city's money. We have a lot of kids that live over in the apartments and the other neighborhoods that their parents can't afford to send them to special camps or summer schools or vacations that a lot of people take. And I think that when we brought up the give back, I know, Troy, you said let's readdress it here. while I'm not going to fight for any of the other issues because the council doesn't seem to be unified on that, I would ask that we set aside, I don't know where we get it from, whether it's from the general fund, but I'd like to have the council discuss potentially that money being added into this from the general fund. It was part of the survey. It was one of the top 4, and I think it's an investment in our youth moving forward. Everyone knows if kids are involved in something and not just idly sitting by, they stay out of trouble and they're better kids growing up. And I think it's a small investment for our future community members.
I'm a little confused because I see the maintenance and operations costs have dropped down, but the supplies and division expenses have increased almost a comparable amount from the decrease. Because the total cost back in 10-11 was $20,469. We're expecting to end year at $21,050, and for the projected budget it's $19,300. Participation, isn't there scholarship type opportunities where kids can have difficulty funding it, they can apply for scholarships to offset some of that?
Yeah, if I can answer all of those questions in a couple answers. Mayor Pro Tem, I think you're referring to the parks programs, 555, not 554.
Oh, I apologize.
554, page 88 is day camp. That's the pay for day camp, the summer program that we have here at the community center. That folks pay for, as well as winter camp and spring camp.
Okay.
On page 89 is the parks programs, playgrounds, 555. That's the budget for the drop-in program in the summertime at Little Cottonwood and Orville Lewis parks. In prior years, it used to be also an after-school program, and,
Right.
and we ran it at a third park as well. Right?
We're down to 2 or 1 now?
We're down to 2.
Okay, that's right.
And we shortened the hours a little bit.
Right.
Councilmember Gross, what you're referring to, from 10-11 to 11-12, we actually moved some money from a different account into this account. We had day camps in a couple different divisions, and we just put it all into one division. So that's where that is. But yes, we do have a very, very small amount of scholarship. Actually, the Run Seal Beach donation, if you remember from last year, that's where that $1,000 went into, because our account was completely depleted, and we weren't able to give out scholarships for probably over a year. And then we've got $1,000 back, and I believe there's still a little bit of money, but not a whole lot, because we don't have any mechanism to replenish that.
Right, and if I remember correctly, the hours would be extended. I'm not sure if the days were extended. Were the days extended also?
Yes.
The weeks were extended from 7 to 10 weeks.
Okay.
The hours were extended about an hour and a half a day.
Right.
And then there included
The free field trips.
field trips and like water play days.
Right.
And, like,
That was considered one of the field trips, yeah. Extending what we offer the kids a little bit above and beyond what we've given them. Not that you haven't done a great job on what you've had. I just think that, we've gotten the survey results, the community's spoken, and we do have that money set aside. It's a very small portion of it. I think it still would leave over $300,000 in that community give back fund. So I would just like for the council to consider that, because I think it's a great investment in our children.
So a little bit of history. 2008, Jerry Mejia did the same thing. Asked for a little bit more for the playgrounds, and we supported that back then. I supported it because I was hoping you would support the rest of the budget, but I think you voted against the budget after I went with you on this one. But I would go with you again and trying to support that. So if that's something that we want to go in, and I've got issues with the 358 give back, but I did see that very loud and clear in the survey, and so I'd just be supportive of that too.
42,000 is what.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got, 356, 358, so it'd still leave over 300,000 that we don't need to touch if we choose not to.
So is there a direction? I'm good with, fitting that in there.
Don't see any objections.
Corey, so we're helping you out.
Thanks.
Oh, he's helping us out. He's looking
Yeah.
after our kids.
I know. Okay, other questions on rec and community services? Okay, and that's it?
I actually must have missed because I have a couple questions left, so.
Which one?
One for community development on, I'm sorry, I don't know the page. It just shows the NPDES funds going up over double. Are we having something special this year? Is that, are we doing a, we're gonna, cat's out of the bag.
Your council member and Mayor Pro Tem, you're absolutely right. That is a year where we didn't do something just like this.
Okay. And then the last thing that I wanted to verify, the loan for Laurel Park, we had to pay at the current rate for 10 years, is that correct? And then 2015, is that when we can go back out and see if we can refinance that at a lower rate? Oh, is it 16? I'm sorry.
The debt.
Okay, I was hoping.
Restructuring.
All right. That's it. I just wanted to make sure that we stay on top of that because, you know, the rates are much lower from what we're paying, and I think it's a good savings for us. That's
Okay,
it.
so I think next up we want to talk about revenues, right? But let's, we'll do two things. I'd like to take a quick recess,
Yeah.
so it's a 10-minute recess. And then we'll do oral communications when we come back so I don't forget that part. So if any member of the public wants to we'll do that real quick. Well, actually, on this particular item, should request or put a request to speak blue card, or you can just come up here and speak. So anybody want to speak? Seeing none, go ahead and close oral communication, and we will continue on with the budgeting session. And the next topic will be the revenues. So, Councilmember Egg, you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Figure you did.
Thank you. Just realized the press is here at the UCLA jacket. It's distracting.
I didn't like it.
Yeah. I have a birthday one too. Yeah.
That's
even worse.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'll get you a cougar.
Okay, so if we can, the staff report, page 2 of 6, just to make it a little bit easier. I just want to go down really quickly and set the table, and then we can just kind of go from there. This is a chart that depicts the sources of revenue. And so it starts out at the highest level, property taxes through. I just basically, if you go through property tax and you see kind of where we're trending, to me, it seems like we potentially are estimating at $120,000. You know, I'll just tell you historically, being in the city and watching this as one source of revenue, it never seemed to go up and down that fast. And most of the people in my neighborhood, a lot of us put in evaluations back when you had to get your house reappraised when everything was falling. And now I think they're going to get really good at kind of going back the other way. But that just seems like, don't get me wrong, I'd like to be able to hope that the property tax and everything goes up that fast. But even if all the houses and all the backlog were to sell, which is happening, would we really be able to recognize that significant of a jump from really 2.8 million to 3 million, or $120,000? And if we are, that's good, but we're betting on it because we're spending up to it. So that was one area, property tax. And just like I said, I'm going to go through them really quick, and then maybe, Josh, if you could just kind of go back and as a response. The transient occupancy tax, jumping from 87 to 103. We've got 2 hotels. You know, we watched the number kind of lag in there. Again, I'm just not sure unless they're expecting big rate increases because it's a % of the rate. Maybe you know more than we do at this point. I just wasn't sure. And the utilization or the capacity seems to be fairly fixed. Franchise fees, we show that going up potentially 25,000. And when you get into the details, we should probably go into that schedule, specifically some of the assumptions there on the franchise fees. I just had a question on license and permits, an additional 70,000. And again, a big portion of that is on business licenses, I think.
Well, if I could respond,
Sure.
That's really the hospital building and parking structure.
So that's the reimbursable
Yeah,
portion? Okay.
The business license falls under the taxes category.
Okay, okay. And then the fines and forfeitures, we talked about that, that's the 100,000 from earlier on the Red Flex cameras. And then lastly, the investment earnings. The city council made a policy change about mid last year where we allowed the treasurer, you will, I think Josh have that designation, to get out of the LAFA investment funds, which is at less than, I don't know, 1/4% or maybe even 1/10%, to actually get into liquid, and I won't call it risky, but investment tools such as mutual fund type things. And so, we're here. Think about this: out of the $11 million or $10 million that switches hands, that kind of stays our stable amount that we keep investing. We're saying we're going to make 10 grand. So I really struggle with that assumption. I don't think we're reaching hard enough or high enough. And I'll just personalize it. I thought last year, way before you came on, Josh, we gave this council, gave the staff the tools to do what they needed to do. Please reach up. If you're going to take a reach goal on something, other than tax revenue, I would say take a reach goal on investments and even push yourself to 25, to 2009 average return. Because back in the day, we used to make 300,000 in the good old days. On the 10 million. So those are probably the highest. So if we can start it really quickly at property tax, the assumption that you have, and again, if we go to that schedule that you have that breaks down the different sources of revenue in more detail, property tax secured, that you show really going from 1.586 to 1.611. So that's about a 20,000, and now jumping up to 100. What is your rationale on that?
My sales tax or my property tax projection there is based on the most recent collection trends and then projecting that forward. So I did see some real strength in the most recent payments we received. I can't speak to the estimate there as to, I wasn't involved with that, but
then let me ask, we get those payments twice a year, right? And so we've already gotten one, but actually this is going to be projecting what we get after June 30th. So we'll get the June 10th or whatever, the spring, payment. Does that come into the first part of the fiscal year through the summer, or we wait until December?
no, wait until December to get our
Okay.
next.
So right now, kind of direction of the strength is our data points really 2 payments behind, but yet we're reaching up 100 grand just as a placeholder. And I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that just seems a little risky. It seems to me we're 100,000 more in revenue that we're planning that doesn't seem to be on firm ground. And again, wouldn't have an issue if we had a $200,000 surplus, but where you got a $9,000 surplus. So I'm a little concerned.
We'll revisit that.
Okay. And then let's go back down to the transient occupancy tax. We were at 87. We expect to close at 90. We've never been over 90, period, and now we're up to 103. So about a $10,000 to $13,000 increase. Is there a change in the market that we're aware of? Are rates going up?
Again, we can revisit that again, but I was looking at the trends, the quarterly trends, and it does indicate we'll be at that level. The smaller hotel in town has really improved as far as their occupancy rates, and the other one is also doing well. So, but I'll definitely take a second look at that.
Yeah.
Well, they've done a lot of refurbishing on the one on LaSalle Boulevard. It's a lot nicer looking now.
Looks nice.
Okay. And then on the utility users tax, specifically on the telephone, obviously, the TUT, as we called it, and Measure DD. We show that going 581, so this year is really the end of last year. And then we show an actually decrease by 20,000 to 600, but still, do we feel comfortable with that? Is there really data? Because we actually get these types of fees monthly, I think, don't we?
Utility user tax. Those are all different providers provide that. I believe it's monthly, but I have to double check.
And then
Yeah, we're not sure what that's going to do, that change that we've done, that broadened the base and lowered the rate, so.
Okay. That one, like I said, I don't have a strong hard feeling. The other one is on the electric, the rate case. Didn't the Southern California Edison pass a portion of their rate change as far to the CPUC? So they would expect the electric rates potentially to go up to some extent. So we kind of show them actually coming down as utility users tax. So there I might say we may not have estimated high enough, but
Okay.
just curious.
Well, that's something we really should have done.
Yeah.
Good information.
While you're on that line, is the gas tax the same question?
Yeah, that was
They
the
dropped almost 30,000.
That again, it's just recent collections really dropped it. I think natural gas is at an all-time low, or a really low price for the market.
Okay. Let's see. The franchise fees, I guess television, we're expecting a spike there.
Yeah, cable is doing really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, these are just up trends.
Yeah, you can see the trend of the growth there, 128 to 150 in the last 3 years where you have actuals.
Well, one of the other providers cut certain channels that were really popular, and I think that's why you might be seeing it. I'm focusing on that.
Okay. And then fines and forfeitures. You just go there real quick. It's always interesting, and the chief kind of taught me a lesson a couple years ago because I was pushing on this. Moving violations, are people just not speeding as much? I mean, I noticed that 93, one side we're seeing red flags is shooting through the roof, and it's increasing, and those are moving violations of a photograph type. And then on the other side, on the on our traffic folks, we just show a decrease. So I'm just curious. It's a 10 grand swing. So anything interesting that trend that's trending towards less moving violations?
He's handing out more business cards.
Gas costs.
You're handing out more business cards. This is my friend.
Did you say the amount we're getting from the courts is lower though? Yeah. We're not,
Capture
doesn't seem like
rates.
we're getting as much from the courts, the per citation.
Yeah, we're getting more on the revenue.
With the red light, we're actually getting more enforcement. If you recall, a year ago, going back the last fiscal year, we were having issues with getting those cases actually even prosecuted. Due to some issues that have happened in the courts, we're seeing more cases now that are successfully prosecuted.
So I guess, like I said, of the 295, I think if I took out some of, like the license fees, was the hospital, so that was 70. So it just seems okay. Possibly we're at 200, Josh, and fees that are a little bit high. Again, let's see where we end up on the expense side after, we've added some things that we just talked about, really what is the net impact. I'm sure you won't have it tonight, but be able to look at it there. Those are my comments on revenue.
Anybody else want to go? Sorry, that's my question on
Yeah,
UT.
yeah. Good. Sure. He hit some of the same things that I was going to ask, so there's no reason to revisit it.
Okay, so, let's see, do we have anything else to talk about? I think, does that kind of cover everything?
You know what, I had just a couple other.
Sure.
So when I go through the assessment and I look at the number of potential part-time folks, and again, I'm thinking of the impacts of ACA. Outside what I do for a living, it's causing havoc for organizations that have part-time people. And so if you added up all the part-time people in our book even, it's about 18. And so if you said that medical coverage for 18 people, worst case scenario, that we, by January 1st, 2014, we're supposed to be able to have a plan of how we're going to cover them, and we have to start reporting at that point. 18 people at $1,000 a month, which is our medical coverage that we afford our employees, even though it costs us more than that. 18,000, that's almost 300,000, 200 and something $1,000 worth of potential ACA impact costs for part-time employees. We may not have that fully evaluated, but I do think it's something that it's the GASB 45 unfunded liability issue of 2013. And I would just like to see us quantify that before we start getting super crazy, especially if we are a little bit short in revenue as compared to our expenses, and we potentially have a liability that kicks in January.
Yeah, we're working on, like I said, understanding that law, but I don't believe it requires us to provide the same level of coverage we already do. It's more like a minimum. And I've heard 60-40 thrown out there as some of the plans. And I do know that if we didn't participate at all in the program, it would be like around the number you say, about 3,000 individual.
That's the penalty.
Yeah, that's the penalty.
Yeah.
But I believe initially looking at it, we'll find a way to mitigate that. We do provide health insurance to the vast majority of our full-timers, and a lot of it's what the IRS defines as a full-time employee.
So just in general, and again, nothing dramatic, is that under the topic part-time employees, let's just put it into kind of a box of what I don't, and I might be by myself, but I'd like to kind of get an accurate count of part-time. I'd like to get an accurate count of if racked and stacked, the 2.5%. If it's really 14 grand, it's 14 grand and it's not a big discussion. Maybe a reminder too of when every labor group got raises, what is that commensurate, just so that we don't symbolically send the wrong message. Also, I don't understand the population of part-time people. I've always understood, especially in Parks and Rec, where there's like 13 equivalent heads, that I thought it was more seasonal, so they would actually potentially come in at a different rate than to have to sit on a rate for years at a time and not get a COLA. I don't know. So it would be interesting kind of as a census of our part-time employees. I just hate leading with part-timers when we're getting ready to go into labor negotiations on full-timers, and we, and I don't know how we've treated them in the past, so it's just kind of like a primer on part-time people. And then also maybe a little bit more on the potential effects on ACA. If you don't believe the 200,000, is it 20,000? Is it 50,000? The bronze plan, or these plans that you're talking about that organizations can pick, you actually set a standard for everybody. So Greg would have to, or whoever would get benefits, Stephen would have to get the same plan as the cheapest plan you're providing. So you potentially affect everybody's coverage by taking the lowest route. And then you have labor laws that won't allow you to decrease hours below the threshold, so you don't have to provide them benefits. There's a lot of pieces in there where it seems like our city lives on part-time employees. That's one of our kind of niches, and I just think it's something we need to evaluate. I'm very interested in discussion on fund balance, but I think from a discussion at break, I think we're probably talking about that in a different session, and they serve as special funds, so I'll save those questions for another night.
Okay, anybody else?
I did have one, and it may be fund balance, where we had set aside I thought it was 20 or 25% for emergency designation. And right now it's showing at 2.3 million. And that's not had any type of an increase or escalation at all. And I know Richard's had some talk about
how much is prudent to set aside in the quote rainy day or emergency type fund. I had lobbied, I think, for 25% at the time, and I think we wound up settling at 20. If that's going to be part of what we're talking about, Greg, in the next meeting on those fund balances, we really ought to look at, I think, look at that as well, because rates haven't changed. Are we still safe with that number at a 20%, or should we be looking at a 25 or 30%? I think, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying that that was only roughly 2 months worth of worth of operational expense, and was that sufficient to cover? It was an emergent
catastrophic
right.
event that
Right.
they would have that money set aside for.
Yeah, if the big one hit, as an example, what's there, but I don't see that changing price-wise. I think it stayed flat the whole way through, yet the total balance on the funds has gone up and down. And maybe that's too high now in comparison, but
Okay, we'll incorporate that.
yeah, on that, yeah.
Okay, so how about we just do a quick roundtable, last comments, questions?
So Mayor, a question, I guess, as a form of procedure, should we expect that the discussions and the pressure points that we've kind of introduced would be potentially updated the budget, and then we could kind of see where we're at? How do we, is this a punch list now, or are you going to rack and stack and give us another published? Because now the number that's in my mind is 9,800, which is the surplus. That's kind of the net of operational general fund. Structural budget deficits are a big thing that my focus is, and I'm just curious, when we kind of rack and stack, we don't have agreement that we have a $200,000 problem yet on revenue. We have some increases in expense. I just would like to kind of keep a track, and then when we get there, we'll have to vote at the hard time of what are we going to do, and I just want to know procedurally, is that how you envision?
June 3rd, would that be our June 3rd? Yeah. Because we have a schedule here. It looks like that would be June 3rd. That would be our goal.
So is your question, Troy, that
To have the punch list.
do we have enough direction to staff as to what?
Give us an update.
Yeah,
I think so.
So, put on June 3rd, because we don't want to be surprised, right? We don't want to be surprised on June 3rd, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's enough direction for your job. If not, get some clarification.
Well, sure.
I received a call from a resident from Richard's neighborhood, which is Rossmore Highlands, and she made a request that the council address Orville Lewis Park as potentially just a couple of hours a day, giving the residents there an ordinance that would allow their dogs to run as they would at a dog park, not have collars on. I know that happens at some parks anyways, but these people wanted to abide by the rules, and so they'd asked for us to potentially address that at our next meeting. If not, some of them are going to come forward and express their interest. I told them they can get a lot further, with residents making the request. But I'd like to work with staff on that, because there's some ideas that I've already come up with and some reservations that I have that I'm sure that there are standards from other cities that have these.
I've had experience in that. My last city, we did that.
Great. Well, what she potentially was asking for was from, say, 8:30 to 10, so that it's not too early and bothering the neighbors, have the dogs be able to run free during that time. And then, of course, it would be taken over the kids from 10 on. She did call back and make a request that they would like an hour or so in the evening after the user groups have used it. And I told her, instead of saying a time, let's just get together with Parks and Rec and find out when that park's utilized by the groups, and then that way we can build that in and we're not conflicting.
Wouldn't this be a good thing to refer back to the Parks and Recreation Commission to come forward with
She asked me to bring it to the council, and they're going to come in and speak and express their concerns. So I don't necessarily think it has to go there and extend the process. It's something we can address, and if we come to an agreement, then maybe we kick it back to Parks and Rec for them to come up with some additional ideas or the hours.
Any closing comments? Okay, Richard? Yeah, I just want to point out that, you know, on the front page, we've got in the end, we have an unassigned fund balance of $3.266. And when you offset that against our pension liability, which is about $2.7 million, we're left with about $500,000 in unspoken for reserve. And some much bigger numbers have been kicked around over the years. But here, you know, here's really where we are. And as Dean said, I would like to discuss if our emergency designation is sufficient, because if we need it in case of a giant earthquake or something, I'm not sure that 2 months is going to be enough. I don't think things are going to get turned around that quickly. So just a general awareness that our unassigned fund balance is 3.2 million, or almost 3.3, but remember that we have an unfunded pension that sits off the books at 2.7, so it uses up the majority of what we have unassigned. And that's it. Thank you.
Rich, can I ask you a question? Asking 45 OPEB designation, 250,000 was our staff attempt of funding unfunded liability. So
Yeah.
I think it would be 2.5 then, or the staff now, or is it 2.7 on top of that?
Well, you've also got an extra 500,000 in funds that are not used, some set aside for the rehabilitation of Los Alamitos Boulevard, which sat there dormant for several years, and then also the community spending priorities project, which we spent, 49 of it tonight, and there's still 300 there. 42, I'm sorry, 42. So there's still a significant amount there, so that's still another $500,000.
We'll get that, Gatsby. What is it? Oh, 2.7.
Yeah.
You made a point of 42, but isn't it really 42 minus what you budgeted?
Oh, okay.
Am I wrong? I mean, you had.
No, it's an additional 42.
Oh, okay.
But it's for 3 years, though.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, if you break it down that way.
Yeah, page 44 of the CAFR, I'm using last year because I knew where it was, says we have unfunded liability of 2.695 million. So that's.
And my only point was then when we did two things, I thought, is we decided we would do a pay-as-you-go. There was 3 different ways to handle it, and so we budget for it every year, and we also put 250,000 and designated that within our fund balance, and that's that 250.
Right.
250. So I think it's 2.699 minus the 250 is
Okay.
really the unfunded portion.
And at what point would we become whole, I guess is the question? Or is it an ongoing where that amount remains the same even though we're kicking in the 250 per year?
Yeah, at the Sand District, we actually want to put ourselves on a payment plan. So on top of what we pay as a pay-as-you-go and not doing a lump sum, we're paying $120 million off over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that, I mean, Rich, I know that's an issue you're really concerned about. I'm totally, I'm trying to hold back because I want to get into that big time. But that definitely is an area of opportunity.
And isn't there a discount, don't you get a percentage off if you pay the full amount or something along those lines? I thought at the Vector they had spoken about that. Not that we're going to, but I know that there's some kind of a.
Actually, there was a recent case where San Jose tried to get out, and CalPERS basically said, yes, our rosy projections of 7% only apply when we're making the numbers, but when you want to get out, we only grant you 2%.
And it's
quadruple their fees.
obscenely expensive. They can't get out, basically. So, yeah, I know.
I wouldn't vote for that
The
anyways.
2.7 Troy doesn't really include the OPEB number, which is considered in the page before. And that went up almost $100,000 also.
Well, that's good that we're going to have a special meeting to address that because there's stuff we need to learn.
Yeah. Okay, is that it, Richard?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I want to just thank the staff and city manager Josh for putting this on. Thanks, council, for their thoughtful questions and attention. One thing I did kind of talk about sort of individually, but I think I'd like to have a scheduled closed session. Looks like city manager Monday, I think, is a planning commission. I'm getting my dates kind of all mixed up. Is that correct, planning? And we'll have, the attorney will be here, correct?
The assistant city attorney comes to the planning commission.
Okay, I think that would be okay to, just to have a brief meeting, just to, again, the topic of the, anticipated litigation. So if we can just plan for that, and hopefully we'll just be respectful of the time and keep it to less than an hour so that it won't impact the planning commission. I think it'll be a chance for the council to get together with the new city attorney staff. So if we can have that happen, that'd be great. And then I think that was really all I had. So we're gonna go ahead and, what?
I know Carrie's gonna be here on the 16th for some reason. If,
We can decide then if that's okay.
okay, I mean, if you want to have him instead of the assistant.
Is the
which
assistant the
would be
CEQA
That's
expert
Lisa.
though? Yeah.
I
I think that's probably the one we,
Yeah, she's the one that went out
Lisa
there.
Kravitz,
yeah.
so.
I disagree. I mean, he's in charge, and I think the purpose of the meeting, as I understand it, would be to give him, to be clear that he's moving in the direction we want him to move in. Is that
Why
not
don't we
what
ask him to, just ask him to be here?
Okay, if you can arrange for that. And if you can't, then let us know. Okay, okay. Will that be okay, Richard?
Yeah, I'm
All right.
just saying he's here on the 16th.
Okay.
He's in the area if you want to schedule that way. Either one's fine
Okay.
with me.
Okay,
Try
look,
for Monday?
Monday next
Yeah.
week, I think that might be,
And maybe if we met with both of them, if she's going to be here anyway, it just,
yeah, that
I
might
think
be.
it's an important meeting where we're going to try and set policy. You know, I
Yeah,
wouldn't want Carrie not to be here.
Okay, I'll call
okay,
him.
okay.
Now,
Pretty flexible.
do we call that then as a special meeting for us at 5 o'clock?
Well, the planning commission meets at 7, so we could perhaps meet at 6.
Okay.
Okay. And so with that, city manager, any other comments?
No, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you all. Thank you, staff.
Josh, good job.
Yeah, very good.